In the fog-choked streets of Victorian London, a cursed Locket sparks a deadly chase. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson unravel the secrets of the Order of the Lunar Veil, a sinister cult obsessed with ancient relics and celestial power. As barrister Charles Grayson vanishes, the Locket's cryptic engravings lead to crypts, docks, and ruins, revealing a web of betrayal tied to a 1763 scandal. With Vesper, a scarred mastermind, always one step ahead, Holmes races against time to expose the Order's myth before her vengeance consumes them all. Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Client. The fog clung to Baker Street like a shroud, its ghostly fingers curling round the gas lamps and muffling the clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Inside 2-1B, the air was thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and the faint crackle of a fire in the hearth. Sherlock Holmes lounged in his armchair, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes half closed in a state of meditative calm that I, Dr. John Watson, knew could erupt into frenetic energy at the slightest provocation. My notebook lay, open on my lap, its pages blank, a testament to the evening's oppressive quiet. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward 9, and I sensed Holmes's restlessness mirrored my own. A sharp rap at the door shattered the silence. Mrs. Hudson's voice, tinged with exasperation, drifted up the stairs, followed by her familiar tread. She appeared moments later, her face a mixture of curiosity and mild disapproval. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, "there's a lady here to see you. She's in a dreadful state, insists it's urgent. Shall I show her up?" Holmes's eyes snapped open, sharp as a hawk's. "By all means, Mrs. Hudson, let us not keep her waiting." The woman who entered was a vision of elegance and distress. Her velvet cloak, deep emerald and finely tailored, spoke of wealth, as did the peacock feather adorning her hat. Yet her face was pale, her auburn hair pinned loosely as if in haste, and her gloved hands clutched a small reticule with a desperation that belied her composure. She was young, perhaps 25, with wide hazel eyes that darted between Holmes and me before settling on the detective, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Her voice trembled, though she fought to steady it. "I am he," Holmes replied, rising with fluid grace. "And this is my colleague, Dr. John Watson. Please, take a seat, Mrs. Eleanor Grayson," she corrected, sinking into the chair I offered. "Thank you for seeing me at this hour." I had nowhere else to turn. Holmes resumed his seat, his expression one of polite curiosity, though I knew his mind was already cataloguing every detail of her appearance. "Pray, tell us what brings you here, Mrs. Grayson. You seem greatly distressed." She drew a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around her reticule. "It's my husband, Mr. Holmes. He's missing, and there's something else, something terrible. I believe he's in grave danger, and it's all because of that wretched locket." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest, though his tone remained measured. "A locket, you say? Let us proceed methodically. Begin with your husband's disappearance. When did you last see him?" Mrs. Grayson's story emerged haltingly at first, but as she spoke, her words gained momentum, as if unburdening herself were a release. Her husband, Charles Grayson, was a barrister of repute, specializing in maritime law. They had been married 3 years, residing in a comfortable townhouse in Kensington. 2 days ago, Charles had left for his office as usual, promising to return for dinner. He had not. No note, no telegram, no word of any kind. His clerks reported that he had left his chambers early, mentioning an urgent meeting, but no one knew with whom or where. And the locket? Holmes prompted, his gaze fixed on her. Mrs. Grayson hesitated, then reached into her reticule and produced a small, ornate object. It was a silver locket, oval in shape, with intricate engravings of vines and roses. A faint tarnish marred its surface, and there was an odd weight to it, as if it held more than mere sentiment. She placed it on the table between us, her hand trembling. "This belonged to Charles's family," she said. "It's been passed down for generations, but he never spoke of it until recently. About a month ago, he began acting strangely distracted, secretive. He would lock himself in his study for hours, and I heard him muttering about the locket, as if it were alive. He said it was cursed, that it brought misfortune to anyone who owned it." Holmes took the locket, turning it over in his hands. His fingers traced the engravings, and he opened it with a faint click. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman, her features delicate but severe, her eyes piercing through the painted surface. There was no inscription, no name to identify her. "A curious piece," Holmes murmured. "And you believe this locket is connected to your husband's disappearance?" "I know it sounds mad," Mrs. Grayson said, her voice rising, "but the night before he vanished, he was frantic. He told me he had to return the locket to its rightful owner, that he'd been contacted by someone who knew its history. He wouldn't tell me who, only that he had to meet them. I begged him not to go, but he was resolute, and now he's gone." Holmes set the locket down and leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "Did he mention any names, any places associated with this meeting?" "No, nothing specific, only that it was urgent, and that the locket's curse had to be undone. I thought he was delirious, but the fear in his eyes, it was real, Mr. Holmes. I've never seen him like that." I glanced at Holmes, expecting a dismissive remark about superstition, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Grayson," he said at last, "have you noticed anyone unusual near your home in recent weeks? Strangers, perhaps, or unfamiliar visitors to your husband's office?" She frowned, considering. "There was a man. About a week ago, I saw him outside our house, standing across the street. He was tall, with a long coat and a hat pulled low. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he seemed to be watching the house. I mentioned it to Charles, and he grew pale, but he wouldn't explain why." Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. "And your husband's habits, any recent changes, beyond his preoccupation with the locket?" "He stopped attending his usual club meetings," she said. "He used to go to the Diogenes Club every Thursday, but he hasn't been in weeks. And he received a letter about 10 days ago. He burned it after reading it, but I saw the envelope. It had a strange seal, like a crescent moon." Holmes's eyes flickered with interest, though he masked it quickly. "A crescent moon, you say? Most intriguing. Mrs. Grayson, I will take your case. The locket and your husband's disappearance are undoubtedly connected, and I intend to uncover how. For now, return home and rest. Leave the locket with me, and do not speak of this to anyone." She hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "You believe me, then, about the curse?" "I believe in facts, Mrs. Grayson," Holmes replied, his tone gentle but firm, "and I will follow them wherever they lead. Watson, will you see Mrs. Grayson to her cab?" I escorted her downstairs, noting the way her shoulders slumped with relief, as if confiding in Holmes had lifted a weight. When I returned, Holmes was examining the locket under a magnifying glass, his expression one of intense concentration. "Well, Watson," he said, without looking up, "what do you make of our client's tale?" It's peculiar, I admitted, settling into my chair. A missing husband, a supposedly cursed locket, a mysterious stranger. It sounds like something out of a Gothic novel. Do you think there's anything to this curse business? Holmes snorted, though his eyes remained fixed on the locket. Superstition is the refuge of the unimaginative, Watson. But the locket itself is a tangible clue, and its history may hold the key to Grayson's fate. Notice the craftsmanship laid Georgian, I'd wager, with engravings that suggest a commission for a noble family. The tarnish indicates neglect, yet it's been recently polished, suggesting Grayson's newfound obsession. He held the locket to the light, revealing faint scratches near the clasp. These marks are fresh, Watson. Someone attempted to force it open, perhaps unaware of the hidden catch. And the portrait, did you observe the woman's attire? Her gown is dated, likely mid-18th century, yet the painting technique suggests a later reproduction, a curious anomaly. I leaned forward, intrigued. You think the locket holds a secret? Undoubtedly, Holmes replied, setting it down. But secrets are only as valuable as the men who seek them. Grayson's disappearance suggests he stumbled upon something or someone who valued this locket highly enough to act. The crescent moon seal is another thread. It's not a common motif, and I suspect it points to an organization, perhaps one with esoteric leanings. An organization? I frowned. You mean a secret society? Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. Let us not leap to melodrama, Watson. But the Diogenes Club may yield answers. Grayson's absence there is telling, and I have a contact who might shed light on his recent associations. Tomorrow we begin in earnest. For now, I require solitude to think. I knew better than to disturb him when he was in such a mood, so I retired to my room, leaving Holmes silhouetted against the fire, the locket gleaming in his hand. Sleep came fitfully, my dreams haunted by visions of a faceless woman and a crescent moon glowing in the fog. That the next morning Baker Street was bathed in a weak, watery sunlight that did little to dispel the chill. Holmes was already dressed, his energy palpable as he paced the sitting room, a stack of newspapers strewn across the table. "Good morning, Watson," he called, barely glancing up. "We have work to do. Grayson's disappearance is no isolated incident. This morning's Times mentions a theft at the British Museum, a minor artifact, a silver amulet with the crescent moon engraving, vanished 3 days ago. Coincidence? I think not." I blinked, struggling to keep pace. "You suspect a connection?" "I suspect a pattern," Holmes corrected, tossing me a newspaper. "The amulet's description matches the locket's aesthetic, same period, same motif. Grayson's letter, the stranger outside his home, the locket's sudden importance all point to a larger scheme. Our first task is to visit Grayson's office. His clerks may know more than they told Mrs. Grayson." We hailed a hansom cab and set off for Lincoln's Inn, where Grayson's chambers were located. The streets of London bustled with life, hawking their wares, clerks hurrying to their offices, and the occasional street urchin darting through the crowd. Holmes sat in silence, his eyes scanning the passing scenery. Though I knew his mind was elsewhere, Grayson's office was a modest affair, tucked into a corner of the Inns of Court. His chief clerk, a wiry man named Perkins, greeted us with nervous deference. He confirmed Mrs. Grayson's account. Charles had left early 2 days ago, claiming an urgent appointment. Perkins had noticed nothing unusual, save for Grayson's distracted demeanor in recent weeks. He was always a steady man. "Mr. Holmes," Perkins said, adjusting his spectacles, but lately he seemed preoccupied. Kept muttering about debts and promises. I thought it was a case troubling him, but he wouldn't say. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Debts, you say, financial or otherwise? Perkins shrugged. Couldn't say, sir. He burned a letter last week. Those melt of wax, like it had a fancy seal. And there was a visitor about 10 days ago. Tall. Fellow longcoat, didn't give a name. Mr. Grayson seemed rattled after he left. Holmes exchanged a glance with me. Did this visitor leave anything? A card, perhaps? No, sir. But I heard him say something as he left the moon rises soon. Sounded odd, but I didn't think much of it. Holmes thanked Perkins and led me back to the cab. The moon rises soon, he mused, his voice low. A coded message, perhaps, or a reference to a deadline. Watson, this affair grows more tangled by the hour. Our next stop is the British Museum. I must see the scene of the amulet's disappearance. The museum was a labyrinth of marble halls and glass cases, its air heavy with the weight of history. The curator, Dr. Alistair Pembroke, a portly man with a walrus moustache, met us in his office. He was visibly distressed by the theft, though he downplayed the amulet's value. It was a trifle, Mr. Holmes, Pembroke said, mopping his brow. A minor piece from a private collection, on loan. Silver, engraved with a crescent moon, dated to the Georgian era. No great loss, but the breach in security is troubling. Holmes examined the empty display case, his eyes scanning for details invisible to me. The lock was picked, he noted, with a tool not unlike a fine watchmaker's pick, precise work. Tell me, Dr. Pembroke, was the amulet linked to any particular family or group? Pembroke frowned. Not that I recall. The donor was anonymous, though the paperwork mentioned a connection to a noble family, some old tale about a curse. I paid it no mind. Holmes straightened, his expression unreadable. A curse, you say? Most intriguing. Thank you, Dr. Pembroke. As we left the museum, Holmes's pace quickened. Watson, the threads are aligning. The locket, the amulet, the crescent moon, they are part of a single tapestry. Grayson's disappearance is no mere accident. He was targeted, drawn into a scheme involving these artifacts. Tonight, we visit the Diogenes Club. Mycroft may know of this crescent moon motif. The Diogenes Club was a fortress of silence, its members bound by a rule against conversation. Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's elder brother, occupied his usual chair in the stranger's room, his corpulent frame dwarfing the furniture. His eyes, so like Sherlock's but colder, flicked over us as we entered. Sherlock, he said, his voice a low rumble. To what do I owe this intrusion? Holmes wasted no time. Charles Grayson, a barrister, missing for 2 days. A silver locket with a crescent moon seal, believed cursed. A stolen amulet from the British Museum, matching the same motif. What do you know? Mycroft's fingers paused on his glass of port. You tread on delicate ground, Sherlock. The crescent moon is a symbol associated with the Order of the Lunar. Vale, a society of antiquarians with a penchant for the occult. They are secretive but influential, with members in high places. Grayson's work in maritime law may have crossed their interests, smuggling, perhaps, or disputed relics. Holmes leaned forward, and the locket, a relic, if rumours hold. True, Mycroft said to be one of 3 keys to a lost artifact of great value. The Order guards such secrets jealously. If Grayson stumbled upon it, he may have attracted dangerous attention. Holmes nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "Thank you, Mycroft. Come, Watson." As we stepped back into the fog, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The mystery of the cursed locket was deepening, its shadow stretching across London's underbelly. Holmes strode ahead, his coat billowing, and I hurried to keep pace, knowing we were on the trail of something extraordinary and perilous. The investigation deepened over the next hours, with Holmes dispatching telegrams to his network of informants while I scoured Grayson's legal files, brought to Baker Street by a breathless Perkins. The files revealed little, save for a contract with Sir Edmund Harrow, a shipping magnate whose name appeared repeatedly in Grayson's recent cases. Harrow's business involved trade routes to the Persian Gulf, routes known for smuggling antiquities. I mentioned this to Holmes, who nodded absently, his attention fixed on a small vial of ash he'd collected from Grayson's fireplace, smouldering wax. "Watson," he said, sniffing the vial. The letter Grayson burned was sealed with a unique resin, likely imported. Another link to Harrow's trade, perhaps, but the locket remains the heart of this affair. Holmes turned the locket over, his magnifying glass revealing a faint inscription hidden beneath the engravings. "Cave Felis Luna. Beware the moons, he translated, his voice low. A warning, or perhaps a command. The portrait inside. Watson, did you notice the crescent moon pendant at her neck? This woman was no mere ancestor." I frowned, puzzled. "You think she's connected to this order?" "I think," he said, "she is the reason for the curse." "Is?" Holmes's words lingered as we prepared for the night of vigilance. The fog outside thickened, but thicker yet was the mystery we faced. The locket, the crescent moon, Grayson's disappearance all pointed to a truth buried deep, one we were determined to unearth, no matter the cost. The hours ticked by, and Holmes's energy showed no sign of waning. He paced the sitting room, muttering to himself, piecing together fragments of the case. I, exhausted but unwilling to retire, watched him, marveling at the relentless drive of his mind. The locket lay on the table, its silver surface catching. The firelight, a silent challenge to our efforts, as midnight approached. A faint sound broke the silencer, soft scratching at the window. I started, but Holmes was already there, peering into the fog. "Our watcher returns," he whispered, his voice edged with excitement. "Stay here, Watson. I shall greet our guest." Before I could protest, he slipped out, a shadow among shadows. I waited, my hand on my revolver, the locket gleaming before me. The fog pressed close, and I felt the weight, as if the very air were conspiring against us. The mystery was far from solved, but with Holmes on the case, I knew we were only beginning. The locket's curse, the order of Grayson's lunar veil. Grayson's fates, these were threads in a tapestry we would unravel or be ensnared by. The game, as Holmes would say, was afoot. The narrative continued to unfold, with Holmes's pursuit of the shadowy figure leading to a narrow alley off Baker Street. The fog was impenetrable, but Holmes moved with the precision of a predator, his senses attuned to every sound. The figure, a tall man cloaked in a long coat, realized he was pursued and broke into a run, his footsteps echoing in the night. Holmes followed, his mind cataloguing details, the man's gait, the faint glint of a silver ring on his hand, the crescent moon emblem catching a stray beam of lamplight. The chase ended at a locked warehouse, the figure vanishing inside. Holmes examined the lock, noting fresh scratches, similar to those on the locket. "Another lock, another secret," he muttered, returning to Baker Street. The locket is no mere heirloom, Watson. It is a key, perhaps literal, to something greater, and someone is willing to risk much to reclaim it. The morning brought new urgency. Holmes dispatched me to Sir Harrow's officers while he pursued a lead at the docks, where Grayson had been last seen. Harrow's office was an opulent affair, filled with artifacts from Egypt and Persia, and a map of the Persian Gulf pinned to the wall, marked with routes Grayson had overseen for. Harrow himself was elusive, his secretary claiming he was abroad, though I suspected otherwise. Holmes returned at noon, his expression grim. The docks yielded little, the said he reported, but a sailor mentioned a stranger asking after Grayson, offering coin for a locket with a locket. Our quarry is cautious, but careless. The warehouse belongs to a shell company linked to Harrow. We visit tonight, Watson. The night brought danger. The warehouse, a derelict relic by the Thames, was guarded by rough men hired to deter intruders. Holmes and I slipped past them, finding a hidden chamber beneath, filled with crates of artifacts, relics, amulets, and more, many bearing the crescent moon. A locket marked as property. Chapter 2. The locket's secrecy. Fog of Baker Street had not lifted by morning, but rather thickened, casting London in a spectral haze that seemed to mirror the mystery before us. Inside 221B, the air was sharp with the scent of coffee and the faint tang of chemicals from Sherlock Holmes's latest experiment. The locket, that enigmatic silver relic, lay on the table, its engravings catching the dim light of the gas lamps. Holmes stood over it, his magnifying glass in hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my notebook now bearing hurried scrawls from the previous night's revelations. Though I sensed we were only scratching the surface of the affair, Holmes had not slept, his energy undimmed by the late hour of our return from the Diogenes Club. Mycroft's words about the order of the lunar veil lingered in my mind, as did the ledger we'd glimpsed in the warehouse, its cryptic entries hinting at a network far larger than a single missing barrister. Holmes, however, was fixated on the locket itself, as if it held the key to Charles Grayson's fate. "Observe, Watson," he said, his voice low but vibrant with excitement. He held the locket aloft, tilting it so the firelight illuminated a series of faint scratches along its edge. "These marks are not random. They form a pattern, deliberate, precise. A cipher, perhaps, or a map. And this inscription, Cave Fellies, Luna, beware the moon's eye, is no mere warning. It is a directive." I leaned closer, squinting at the locket. The scratches were indeed methodical, a series of tiny lines and curves, almost invisible without magnification. "A cipher?" I asked. "To what end?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "To conceal a secret, Watson. The locket is more than a family heirloom. It is a vessel, a key to something the Order of the Lunar Veil covets. Grayson's disappearance, the stolen amulet, the crescent moon motif all are threads in a tapestry of obsession. We must unravel it." He set the locket down and began, pacing, his long fingers gesturing as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Our first task is to decode the locket's markings. Then we return to Grayson's office." Perkins, the clerk, was forthcoming, but I suspect he knows more than he let on. And Sir Edmund Harrow's name in that ledger cannot be ignored. His shipping empire is a conduit for antiquities, perhaps the very relics the Order seeks. Nodded, though my mind was still grappling with the scope of the case, and Elias Vane, the man from the warehouse, a pawn Watson but a dangerous one. His obsession with the Grayson family suggests a personal vendetta, but his connection to the order makes him their instrument. We must find him, but first, the locket. Holmes retrieved a sheet of paper and began transcribing the scratches, his pen moving with precision. I watched, fascinated, as the chaotic marks resolved into a grid of symbols, lines, arcs, and dots arranged in a pattern that resembled a star chart. Holmes's fingers paused, his eyes narrowing. "Curious," he murmured. "The markings correspond. 2 celestial coordinates, but they are incomplete. A fragment of a larger design, perhaps. The locket may be one piece of a set, as Mycroft suggested. The stolen amulet from the British Museum could be another." I frowned. "You think the order is collecting these pieces?" "Precisely. And Grayson, wittingly or not, became entangled in their pursuit. His legal work for Harrow likely exposed him to their activities, smuggling, fraud, or worse. The letter with the crescent moon seal was no coincidence. It was a summons, or a threat." Holmes's words were interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered, bearing a telegram. "This just arrived, Mr. Holmes, from a Mr. Lestrade." Holmes tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the message. "Lestrade has news. A body was found near the docks, unidentified, but bearing a crescent moon tattoo. We must go at once." The cab ride to the Thames was a blur, the fog cloaking the city in a veil of mystery. The docks were a hive of activity despite the hour stevedores unloading crates, sailors shouting in a dozen tongues, and the ever-present stench of tar and fish. Inspector Lestrade met us at a secluded wharf, his face grim beneath his bowler hat. "Morning, Holmes. Dr. Watson," he said, tipping his hat. "Sorry to drag you out, but this one's odd. Found him at dawn, washed up by the tide. No papers, no name, but this mark on his arm thought it might interest you." He led us to a makeshift tent where the body lay, covered by a tarp. Lestrade pulled it back, revealing a man of middle age, his face weathered by a life at sea. His left forearm bore a tattoo, a crescent moon encircled by vines, identical to the locket's engravings. Holmes knelt beside the body, his magnifying glass tracing the tattoo's lines. "Fresh ink," he noted, "applied within the last month. The man was no sailor, his hands are too soft, his boots too fine. A gentleman fallen on hard times. Perhaps, Watson, your medical opinion." I examined the body, noting the pallor and the faint bruising around the neck. "Strangulation," I said. "No water in the lungs, he was dead before he hit the river. The bruising suggests a cord, or rope, applied with force." Holmes nodded, his gaze distant. "A warning, or a disposal. This man was connected to the order, likely a low-ranking member who outlived his usefulness. Lestrade, have your men searched the docks for any witnesses to a struggle last night? And check the local taverns. Someone may have seen this man with a tall figure in a long coat." Lestrade raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "You think this ties to your missing barrister?" "I know it does," Holmes replied, rising. "Come, Watson." We returned to Lincoln's Inn. Grayson's office was as we'd left it, though Perkins was more nervous this time, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he answered Holmes's questions. "I swear, Mr. Holmes, I told you all I know," he stammered. "Mr. Grayson was a good man, but he'd been jumpy lately. That letter, the one with the seal, he burned it right here in the fireplace. I smelled the wax, like I said." Holmes knelt by the fireplace, sifting through the ashes. And you saw nothing of its contents? Perkins hesitated, then leaned closer. I didn't read it, sir, but I saw a word, Vesper, written in red ink, bold as you please. I thought it was a name, but Mr. Grayson wouldn't say. Holmes's eyes flickered with interest. Vesper, evening star, or perhaps a code. Thank you, Perkins. You've been most helpful. As we left, Holmes's pace quickened. Vesper is no mere name, Watson. It's a signal, a reference to the Order's rituals. The crescent moon, the evening star symbols of transition, of secrets unveiled. We must consult my files on esoteric societies. The British Museum may hold more clues, but first we return to Baker Street. Back at 221B, Holmes dove into his archives, pulling out a dusty tome on occult symbolism. I watched as he cross-referenced the Locket's markings with diagrams of celestial patterns, his fingers tracing lines only he could see. The scratches form a partial map, he said at last, a constellation incomplete without its counterparts. The amulet, and perhaps a third relic, complete the design. The Order believes these relics point to a treasure and artifact of power or wealth. I frowned, skeptical. A treasure? Surely this is more superstition. Holmes's lips twitched in a rare smile. Superstition is a mask, Watson. The Order uses it to control, to manipulate. Grayson's fear of the Locket's curse was no accident. It was cultivated. But by whom? Vane is a player, but not the mastermind, Harrow, perhaps, or someone higher in the Order. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Holmes dispatched telegrams to his informants, seeking traces of Elias Vane and Sir Edmund Harrow. I visited the British Museum again, questioning Dr. Pembroke about the amulet's donor. He was evasive, but a slip of the tongue revealed the donor was a private collector, with ties to a Kensington address near the Graysons' home. Holmes seized on this. A neighbour, Watson, or a facade. The Order operates in shadows, but their reach is long. Tonight, we watch the Grayson house. If Vane is watching, he'll return. The fog was thicker that evening, the streets of Kensington silent, save for the occasional clatter of a passing cab. We took up position across from the Grayson townhouse, concealed in an alley. Hours passed, the cold seeping into my bones, but Holmes remained still, his eyes fixed on the house. At midnight, a figure appeared, a tall man in a long coat, his hat pulled low. Vain he lingered by the gate, his gaze sweeping the street. Holmes signalled for silence, his hand on my arm. Vane approached the house, producing a key stolen, no doubt, and slipped inside. Holmes moved like a wraith, and I followed, my heart pounding. The house was dark, its silence oppressive. We found Vane in Grayson's study, rifling through papers. Holmes stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stillness. Elias Vane, I presume. Vane spun, his scarred face pale in the moonlight. Holmes, he spat, drawing a knife. You're meddling in affairs beyond you. Holmes's cane flicked out, disarming Vane with a crack. Where is Charles Grayson? He demanded. Vane laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You'll find him when the moon rises. The locket is ours, Holmes. You can't stop it. Before Holmes could act, Vane hurled a chair at the window, shattering it, and leaped into the fog. Holmes pursued, but the mist swallowed Vane's trail. We searched the study, finding a hidden compartment in Grayson's desk. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with frantic notes about the locket, the Order, and a name, Vesper, Holmes. Scanned the journal, his expression grim. Grayson knew too much. He uncovered the Order's smuggling ring tied to Harrow's ships. The locket was his leverage, but it made him a target. Vesper is the key, perhaps, a person, perhaps a place. We must find it. The night ended without Vane, but with new pieces of the puzzle. Holmes returned to Baker Street, the journal in hand, his mind racing. I followed, my thoughts a whirl of crescents, curses, and the shadowed figure of Elias Vane. The next day dawned. Grey, the fog unrelenting. Holmes was already at work, the locket and journal spread before him. He'd deciphered more of the locket's markings, revealing coordinates that pointed to a derelict estate in Sussex. The Order's stronghold, perhaps, he said, or a trap. Either way, we go tonight. I protested, citing the danger, but Holmes was resolute. Grayson is alive, Watson. The journal mentions a meeting at the estate, set for tomorrow, the night of the new moon. The Order's rituals revolve around lunar cycles. We have one chance to find him. We prepared for the journey, Holmes arming himself with his revolver and a set of lockpicks, while I carried my medical bag and a stout stick. The train to Sussex was a tense affair, Holmes silent, his mind locked on the task ahead. The estate, a crumbling manor surrounded by overgrown gardens, loomed like a spectre in the dusk. We crept through the grounds, avoiding patrolsmen in dark cloaks, each bearing the crescent moon emblem. Inside, the manor was a maze of dusty halls and locked doors. Holmes's lockpicks made short work of them, and we found a chamber beneath, lit by flickering torches. There, bound and gagged, was Charles Grayson. His face was haggard, his eyes wide with fear. Before we could free him, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Welcome, Mr. Holmes." It was Sir Edmund Harrow, flanked by cloaked figures. In his hand was the stolen amulet, its crescent moon gleaming. "You've been tenacious," he said, "but the locket belongs to the Order. Hand it over, and Grayson lives." Holmes's eyes narrowed, and the curse Harrow laughed. "A fiction to control fools like Grayson. The locket is a key to a vault gold, jewels, relics, the Order's wealth hidden for centuries. Grayson found it and thought to expose us." Holmes moved faster than I could follow, tossing a smoke bomb from his pocket. In the chaos, we freed Grayson and fought our way out, Harrow's men in pursuit. The fog aided our escape, and we reached the train. Grayson, weak but alive. Back in London, Grayson confirmed Harrow's story. The locket was no cursed relic, but a map to a vault in Sussex, guarded by the Order. His legal work had uncovered their smuggling, and Vane, a disgraced cousin, had betrayed him to Harrow. Holmes sent Lestrade to raid the estate, but Harrow and Vane had vanished, the vault empty. The locket, its secret revealed, was returned to Mrs. Grayson, who wept with relief at her husband's return. As we sat in Baker Street, the fog lifting at last, Holmes lit his pipe. "A case of greed, Watson, dressed as superstition. The Order is scattered, but Harrow and Vane remain. The game is not over." I nodded, the locket's weight still lingering in my mind. The mystery was solved, but its shadows would follow us, as all great cases do. Chapter 3. Shadows on Baker Street. The fog that had cloaked London for days seemed to tighten its grip as night fell, transforming Baker Street into a labyrinth of shadows. Inside 2-1B, the warmth of the fire did little to dispel the chill that lingered after our harrowing escape from the Sussex estate. Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair. The locket and Charles Grayson's journal spread before him on the table, their secrets only partially unveiled. I, Dr. John Watson, occupied my usual seat, my revolver within reach, a precaution born of the previous night's encounter with Elias Vane. The rescue of Charles Grayson had been a triumph, but the flight of Sir Edmund Harrow and Vane left the case unresolved, a puzzle with missing pieces that gnawed at Holmes's relentless mind. Holmes's fingers traced the locket's engravings, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "The vault was empty, Watson," he said, his voice low but taut. With frustration, Harrow anticipated our move, stripped it bare before we arrived. The locket's map led us to Sussex, but the true prize, whatever the order guards, remains hidden. Vane's taunt, "The moon rises," suggests a deadline, a ritual tied to the lunar cycle. We have days, perhaps hours, to act. I glanced at the journal, its pages filled with Grayson's frantic notes about the order of the lunar veil, the locket, and the mysterious Vesper. Grayson's journal mentions Vesper repeatedly, I said. A person, a place, or something else. It's the key, isn't it? Holmes nodded, his gaze distant. Vesper is the linchpin. Grayson believed it was a name, but I suspect it's a coda reference to the evening star, Venus, which aligns with the crescent moon in certain cycles. The order's rituals are steeped in celestial symbolism. Vesper may denote a time, a location, or an individual orchestrating their scheme. Harrow's involvement confirms the Stakes' shipping empire is a facade for smuggling relics, but he answers to someone higher. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 10, its chime swallowed by the fog outside. Holmes rose, pacing the room with the restless energy of a caged panther. We cannot wait for Harrow to strike again. Vane's intrusion into Grayson's study proves they seek something beyond the Locket papers, perhaps, or another relic. We must retrace Grayson's steps, starting with his clients. Harrow's name dominates his files, but there are others. Merchants, foreign traders. One of them may hold the next clue. Before I could respond, a faint sound reached my ears. Soft, deliberate creak from the street below. Holmes froze, his head tilting like a hound catching a scent. He moved to the window, parting the curtains with a finger. The fog was impenetrable, but a flicker of movement betrayed a figure across the street, cloaked in shadow, motionless beneath a gas lamp. "Our watcher returns," Holmes whispered, his voice edged with excitement. "Vane, or one of his ilk. Stay here, Watson. Keep the lights burning." He donned his coat and slipped out, a wraith vanishing into the mist. I waited, my hand on my revolver, the locket gleaming on the table like a talisman. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant clatter of a hansom cab. Minutes stretched into an eternity, and I fought the urge to follow. Knowing Holmes's methods required solitude, at last, he returned, his face flushed with exertion, a faint tear in his sleeve. He eluded me, he said, tossing his coat aside, but not before I glimpsed his face. Not Vane, but another, younger, with the same crescent moon ring. "The Order has eyes on us, Watson. They know we have the locket and Grayson's journal. This watcher was no mere spy, he was planting something." Holmes crossed to the door, examining the frame. His fingers paused on a small, wax-sealed envelope tucked beneath the mat, its surface embossed with a crescent moon. He opened it with care, revealing a single sheet of parchment. The message was brief, written in red ink. "The moon rises at Vesper, return the locket, or Baker Street burns." I stared at the note, my blood running cold. A threat, Holmes. They mean to intimidate us. Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. Intimidation is the weapon of the desperate, Watson. This note confirms their urgency. Vesper is imminent a ritual, a meeting, or a theft. We must act swiftly. Tomorrow we visit Harrow's offices. His secretary's evasion suggests he's in London, not abroad, and we must protect the Grayson's Vane's vendetta may extend to Eleanor. The night passed uneasily, with Holmes poring over the journal and the Locket's markings, while I kept watch at the window. No further figures appeared, but the fog seemed alive, a veil concealing unseen threats. Dawn brought a weak, grey light, and with it a renewed sense of purpose. Harrow's offices were in the city, a grand edifice of marble and glass overlooking the Thames. The secretary, a pinched-faced man named Crawley, greeted us with thinly veiled hostility. "Sir Edmund, he's unavailable," he said, his eyes darting to the door. "He's been in Constantinople for weeks." Holmes leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "A lie, Mr. Crawley. Harrow's ship, the Ecliptic, docked at Tilbury 2 days ago. I suggest you tell us where he is, or Scotland Yard will take. An interest in your employer's cargo manifests." Crawley paled, his fingers twitching. I don't know where he is. He sends instructions by courier, but there was a meeting last week at his club, the Crescent Club in Pall Mall. He mentioned a guest, someone called Vesper. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Thank you, Crawley. You've been most cooperative." As we left, Holmes's pace quickened. The Crescent Club, Watson, a private establishment known for its exclusivity and discretion. If Harrow met Vesper there, we may find traces of their plans. But first, we check on the Graysons. We hailed a cab to Kensington, where the Grayson townhouse stood quiet, its curtains drawn. Eleanor Grayson met us at the door, her face pale but composed. Charles was resting, she said, still weak from his ordeal. She led us to the drawing room, where Grayson sat by the fire, his hands trembling as he clutched a glass of brandy. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice hoarse. "I owe you my life, but this isn't over, is it? Harrow, Vane, they won't stop." Holmes took a seat, his gaze fixed on Grayson. "Tell me about Vesper, Mr. Grayson. Your journal mentions it repeatedly. What did you uncover?" Grayson hesitated, his eyes darting to his wife. "It began with a client, a merchant named Alaric Thorne. He hired me to settle a dispute over a shipment from Bussorah, antiquities bound for Harrow's warehouses. I found irregularities, false manifests, hidden crates. Thorne let slip a name, Vesper. He said it was a person, a collector who brokered relics for the order. I dug deeper, found references to the locket in old family papers. It was no heirloom. It was stolen centuries ago from a noble woman tied to the order. They believe it's a key to a vault, not just gold, but something powerful." Holmes leaned forward, and Vane. "My cousin," Grayson admitted, his voice bitter. "Elias was disgraced years ago, obsessed with our family's history. He joined the order, saw the locket as his redemption. He betrayed me to Harrow, convinced I'd stolen his birthright." Holmes nodded, his fingers steepled, "And the vault's location?" Grayson shook his head. "I never found it. The locket's markings point to Sussex, but the journal mentions another site Vesper's hold, a ruin in Cornwall. I thought it was a myth, but Vane believed it." Holmes rose, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Stay here, and admit no strangers." Watson, we return to Baker Street. The Crescent Club awaits. The Crescent Club was a fortress of privilege, its oak-panelled halls smelling of cigars and old money. The steward, a Dior man named Hargreaves, confirmed Harrow's presence the previous week, but claimed no knowledge of Vesper. Holmes's probing questions elicited a slip. A private room had been reserved for a special guest. With instructions to admit no one else, we searched the room, finding a discarded cigar band with a crescent moon embossed in gold. Holmes pocketed it, his eyes gleaming. Harrow's brand, Watson. He was here, with Vesper. The Order's inner circle is closer than we thought. As we left, a figure brushed past a young man, his face half hidden by a scarf, a crescent, moon ring glinting on his hand. Holmes gave chase, but the man vanished into the fog. Another of the Order's spies, Holmes muttered. They're closing in. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread a map of Cornwall, marking Vesper's hold, a ruined castle, Watson, tied to legends of a lost treasure. The Locket's coordinates may point there, not Sussex. We travel tomorrow, but first we set a trap. The Order wants the Locket, let them come for it. That night, Holmes arranged a decoy, a false telegram, sent to Lestrade, hinting that the Locket was being moved to a safe house. We waited in darkness, the Locket hidden in Holmes's pocket, a replica on the table. At 2 a.m., the window creaked, and a figure slipped inside Vane, his scarred face twisted with greed. Holmes sprang, pinning Vane to the floor. "Where is Harrow?" he demanded. "What is Vesper?" Vane laughed, blood trickling from his lip. "You're too late, Holmes. Vesper's hold awaits, and the moon rises tomorrow. The Locket's mine." Before Holmes could press further, Vane twisted free, hurling a knife that grazed my arm. He leaped through the window, vanishing into the fog. Holmes cursed, but his eyes burned with determination. "He's wounded, Watson. He'll lead us to Harrow or to Vesper." We leave for Cornwall at dawn. The train to Cornwall was a tense journey, the Locket heavy in Holmes's pocket, Grayson's journal in my bag. The fog lifted as we left London, but a storm brewed on the horizon, mirroring the danger ahead. Vesper's hold loomed in my minder. Ruin, a myth, a battleground. We arrived at dusk, the castle a silhouette against the cliffs. Holmes scouted the grounds, finding fresh tracks Vane had been here. Inside, the ruins were a maze of collapsed walls and hidden passages. We found a chamber, its walls carved with crescent moons, a stone altar at its center. There, waiting, was Harrow, flanked by cloaked figures. In his hand was a second locket, identical to ours. "You've brought the key, Holmes," he said. "The vault opens tonight, under the new moon. Hand it over, and you leave alive." Holmes's voice was cold. "The vault is empty, Harrow. You've been played by Vesper, whoever they are." Harrow's smile faltered, and in that moment, Vane lunged from the shadows, seizing the second locket. "It's mine," he screamed, triggering a mechanism in the altar. The floor shook, revealing a hidden stair. We fought our way down, disarming Harrow's men, but Vane reached the vault, first a chamber filled, not with gold, but with ancient texts, maps, and a single massive crescent moon carved into the wall. Vane laughed, clutching both lockets. "The Order's secrets, Holmes. Power beyond your dreams." Holmes tackled him, the lockets clattering to the floor. In the struggle, Vane triggered another trapper collapse, sealing the vault. We dragged Vane and Harrow out, the lockets in hand, as the chamber crumbled. Back in London, Lestrade arrested Harrow, but Vane escaped in the chaos. The Lockets were studied, revealing maps to other order strongholds, but Vesper remained a ghost. Holmes sat by the fire, the crescent moon ring in his hand, his mind already on the next move. "The game continues, Watson," he said. "Vesper is out there, and the Order's secrets are far from buried." Chapter 4. The Crescent Moon Seal. The train rattled back to London through a dawn streaked with crimson. The storm that had threatened Cornwall now breaking over the moors behind us. Inside our compartment, Sherlock Holmes sat in silence, his sharp profile etched against the window, the two lockets, one from the Graysons, the other seized from Sir Edmund, Harrow resting in his gloved hands. I, Dr. John Watson, nursed a bruise on my arm from the chaos at Vesper's hold, my mind still reeling from the collapse of the vault and Elias Vane's escape. The crescent moon ring, taken from Harrow's man, glinted on the seat beside Holmes, a silent reminder of the order of the lunar veil's reach. We had thwarted their ritual, but the spectre of Vesper person, place, or phantom loomed, larger than ever. Holmes turned the lockets over, his fingers tracing their identical engravings. "2 keys, Watson," he murmured, "but to what?" The vault at Vesper's hold yielded texts, not treasure maps, rituals, histories of the Order. The locket's markings point to more, perhaps a network of sites. Vane's obsession suggests. He knows their true purpose, and Harrow's fear betrays a master above him. I glanced at the ring, its crescent moon emblem catching the light. And Vesper. Grayson's journal called it a collector, a broker. Could it be a title passed among the Order's leaders? Holmes's eyes flickered with interest. "A plausible theory, Watson. Vesper, the evening star, aligns with the Order's lunar fixation. It may denote their inner circle, or a single figure orchestrating their moves. The crescent moon seal on that threatening note at Baker Street is our next thread. Its wax was unique rosone from the Levant, used in esoteric rites. We must trace its source." The journey passed in tense quiet, Holmes lost in thought, while I jotted notes on the case, my pen struggling to keep pace with the whirlwind of events. Charles Grayson was safe, Harrow in custody. But Vane's flight and the Order's persistence cast a shadow over our victory. The lockets, with their cryptic inscription, "Cave Fellies, Luna, beware the moons," eyes seemed to pulse with secrets, as if daring us to unlock them. Back at Baker Street, the fog had lifted, replaced by a drizzle that streaked the windows. Mrs. Hudson greeted us with coffee and a scowl, muttering about the state of Holmes's coat, torn in the scuffle at Vesper's hold. Holmes ignored her, spreading the locket's ring, and Grayson's journal on the table, alongside the threatening note with its crescent moon seal. "First, the seal," he said, producing a small vial of ash from his pocket. The wax's residue scraped from the note. Its scent is distinctive myrrh and cedar with a trace of amber. Few in London import such a blend. We begin with Alaric Thorne, Grayson's client. His trade in Busra antiquities may link to the seal's origin. I frowned, recalling Grayson's words. Thorne mentioned Vesper, didn't he? A collector tied to the Order. "Precisely," Holmes replied, his fingers drumming on the table. "Thorne is our bridge to the Order's underbelly. His dispute with Harrow's shipments was no accident. Grayson uncovered their smuggling, and Thorne's slip about Vesper was a warning. We visit his warehouse today, but first I must consult my chemical index." Holmes retreated to his workbench, where vials and burners cluttered the surface. He heated a sample of the wax, its aroma filling the room, sharp and exotic. The resin is Syrian, Watson, he said, peering through a microscope. Used in rituals by sects like the Order. Thorn's imports include such materials, disguised as incense. This seal is their signature. A knock interrupted us Inspector Lestrade, his face flushed from the damp. Holmes, Watson, he said, tipping his hat. Harrows clammed up, won't say a word without his lawyer, but we searched his office, found this. He produced a letter, its envelope bearing the crescent moon seal, identical to our note. It's addressed to Harrow from someone calling themselves Vesper. Says to secure the second key before the lunar convergence. Holmes seized the letter, his eyes scanning the text. The lunar convergence, a celestial event, likely the new moon in 3 days. Vesper's hand is clear, Watson. They command Harrow, not the reverse. Lestrade, where was this letter found? In a hidden drawer, Lestrade said, along with a list of names, merchants, collectors, a few nobles. We're checking them, but it's slow work. Holmes nodded, pocketing the letter. Keep Harrow under guard. He's a pawn, but a valuable one. And watch for Elias Vaintor, scarred, dangerously unhinged. Watson, we go to Thorn's warehouse. The warehouse district by the Thames was a maze of crates and cranes, its air thick with the stench of pitch and brine. Thorn's establishment was a squat brick building, its sign faded but legible, Thorn and Sons, importers. The door was ajar, a faint light flickering within. Holmes signaled for caution, his revolver in hand, and we entered. Inside, the warehouse was a treasure trove of antiquities, statues, urns, and crates stamped with foreign script. A man emerged from the shadows, middle-aged, with a neatly trimmed beard and nervous eyes. Mr. Holmes, he said, his voice quavering. I'm Alaric. Thorn, I expected you, after Grayson's troubles. Holmes's gaze was piercing. You know why we're here, Mr. Thorn. The Locket, the Order, Vesper. Speak plainly, or Scotland Yard will take an interest in your shipments. Thorn paled, gesturing to a cluttered office. I meant no harm, he said, sinking into a chair. Grayson was my lawyer, handling a dispute with Harrow's company. I noticed oddities, crates, mislabeled, relics not in the manifests. I told Grayson, and he dug deeper. Then he asked about Vesper. And who is Vesper? Holmes pressed, leaning forward. Thorn hesitated, his fingers twisting a crescent moon pendant at his neck. A name whispered among collectors. A broker, they say, who deals in relics too dangerous for the open market. I met them once, at a private auction in Limehouse. Cloaked, masked, impossible to identify. They bought a silver amulet, like the one stolen from the museum. They mentioned the locket, said it was one of 3. I told Grayson, and he grew obsessed. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and the crescent moon seal. Thorn flinched. Vesper's mark. I received a letter, months ago, demanding I secure the locket. I refused, but Grayson, he found it in his family's papers. Vane came after, threatening me. I swear, I don't know where Vesper is. Holmes studied Thorn, then rose. You've been helpful, Mr. Thorn. Stay in London and speak to no one of this. As we left, Holmes's expression was grim. Thorn is terrified, Watson, but truthful. Vesper is no mytha mastermind, hiding behind the Order's rituals. The lockets are keys to a triad of relics, each tied to a site like Vesper's hold. We must find the third. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread a map of England. marking Vesper's hold and the Sussex estate. The Locket's coordinates suggest a third site, likely in the North Yorkshire, perhaps, where lunar cults once thrived. Grayson's journal mentions a northern star, possibly a clue. A telegram arrived from Lestrade, a sighting of Vane near Limehouse at a tavern, known as the Moon's Eye. Holmes seized his coat. Vane is our lead to Vesper, Watson. We go tonight. Limehouse was a warren of narrow streets, its air heavy with opium and coal smoke. The Moon's Eye was a dingy pub, its sign a crescent moon wreathed in clouds. Inside, sailors and dock workers drank in sullen silence. Holmes, disguised as a merchant, scanned the room while I lingered by the bar. My hand on my revolver, Vane appeared at a corner table, his scarred face half hidden by a hood. He met a cloaked figure, their conversation hushed but urgent. Holmes signalled me to stay put, slipping closer. I caught fragments of their words. Vesper, the third key. Yorkshire. The cloaked figure handed Vane a sealed letter, its crescent moon gleaming. Before Holmes could act, Vane spotted him, his eyes widening. He bolted, knocking over a table, and the cloaked figure vanished into the crowd. Holmes pursued Vane through the streets, but the fog swallowed him. We returned to the tavern, finding the letter dropped in Vane's flight. It read, "The third key lies at Seline's Crag. The convergence nears. Vesper watches." Holmes's eyes burned with triumph. Selina's Crag, Watson, a ruin in Yorkshire, tied to ancient lunar worship. The third locket is there, and Vesper's plan culminates at the new moon. We leave tomorrow. The night was restless, Holmes poring over maps and texts, while I bandaged my arm, the graze from Vane's knife, a nagging ache. Dawn brought a summons from Eleanor Grayson. Charles had received a new threat. A crescent moon seal burned into their door. Holmes dispatched a constable to guard them, his focus now on Yorkshire. The train to York was a blur, Holmes sketching the Locket's markings, their celestial patterns aligning with Selina's Crag. The Order believes the Lockets unlock a relic of power, he said. Not gold, but knowledge texts, perhaps, or a weapon disguised as myth. Vesper seeks it, and Vane is their tool. Selina's Crag was a desolate ruin, its stones carved with moons and stars, perched on a windswept cliff. We arrived at dusk, the new moon a faint sliver in the sky. Holmes scouted the site, finding fresh tracks Vane had beaten us here. Inside, the ruins hid a crypt, its entrance sealed with a crescent moon lock. Holmes used the lockets, their engravings, aligning with the mechanism. The door groaned open, revealing a chamber lit by torches. At its center stood a cloaked figure, Vesper, their face masked, holding a third locket. Vane knelt beside them, his eyes feverish. "You're punctual." "Holmes," Vesper said, their voice low, unplaceable. "The lockets are keys to the Codex, Selina." Chapter 5. The Dockside Rendezvous. The drizzle that had greeted our return from Yorkshire had turned to a biting sleet by evening, transforming London's labyrinthine streets into a glistening maze of misery. Inside 2-1B Baker Street, the fire roared, casting flickering shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes sat. The Codex Salinas open before him, its cryptic pages a silent taunt. The two lockets, their silver surfaces etched with celestial patterns, lay beside the ancient tome, their secrets partially unravelled but still guarding the enigma of Vesper, the shadowy master of the Order of the Lunar Veil. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my revolver cleaned and loaded. The ache in my arm from Vane's knife, a dull reminder of our narrow escape from Selina's crag. Elias, Vane's presumed death in the crypt collapse and Vesper's flight with the third locket weighed heavily, as did Holmes's unspoken certainty that the game was far from over. Holmes's eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the codex, his fingers tracing lines of script that blended Latin with arcane symbols. "The codex is no book of power, Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with intensity. "It's a ledger of deception, a history of the Order's manipulations, forged relics, and extorted wealth. Yet it hints at a final secret, veiled in metaphor, the moon's eye at the water's edge. Where the veil thins, Vesper seeks this, and the third locket is its key to its... We must surface to act." I glanced at the crescent moon ring, now resting on the mantle, its silver glinting ominously. The water's edge, could it point to the Thames? The docks where Grayson was last seen? Holmes nodded, closing the codex with a snap. "Precisely. The Order's smuggling operations, tied to Harrow's ships, center on the docks. Grayson's journal mentioned a meeting there, and Vane's last sighting was in Limehouse, at the Moon's Eye Tavern. The veil may be a ritual site, hidden in plain sight. We must investigate, but Vesper's spies are watching us. Baker Street, the Graysons, even the Lestrade's yard. Tonight, we seek an informant at the docks, one who knows the Order's movements." Holmes rose, retrieving a worn map of the Thames waterfront, its edges frayed from use. He marked Limehouse and nearby wharves, his finger pausing on a cluster of warehouses. "Here, Watson, a ship, the Stellar Crescent, is docked at Wapping Wharf, owned by a Harrow's proxy, a proxy. The Order's relics pass here through. Vesper may rendezvous there, seeking the Locket third, for we go at dusk, disguised." The prospect of another venture into London's underbelly stirred my blood, but the memory of Vane's knife and Vesper's traps tempered my enthusiasm. "And if Vesper is there?" I asked. Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile, grim. "Then we unmask them, Watson, or force their hand. The Locket third is their obsession. They'll risk much for it. But first, we protect the codex, key, crossed to a hidden safe behind a portrait of Sir Isaac Newton, locking the codex and 2 lockets inside. The Order knows we have them. Let them try." As dusk fell, we donned disguises. Holmes as a grizzled dock worker, his face smudged with grease, and I as his clerk, my spectacles replaced with a false pair to alter my look. The sleet stung our faces as we hailed a cab to Limehouse, the city a sea of blurred lights and muffled sounds. Holmes was silent, his mind a whirl of deductions, but his hand rested on his revolver, a concealed within. The Moon's Eye Tavern was as squalid as before, its air thick with tobacco and despair. We took a corner table, Holmes scanning the crowd with a practiced eye. A barmaid, her face pockmarked but her gaze sharp, sidled over. "What'll it be, gents?" she asked, her voice low. Holmes slipped a sovereign into her hand, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Information, my dear. A man named Vesper, or a tall figure in a cloak, masked, seen here." The barmaid hesitated, glancing at the room over. "Not Vesper, but a cloaked one came to nights past, met a sailor, Black Jack, they call Black him. Jack, he's on the Star Crescent, at Wapping, whispers of a Moondeal relics, they say. Be wary, Mr. He's Jack's a mean one." Holmes nodded, passing another coin. "Where's Black now?" "Jack now, likely at the wharf, loading cargo," she said, pocketing the coin. Watch for a man with a tattoo moon on his wrist. We left, the sleet now a steady rain, the Thames a black ribbon ahead. Wapping Wharf was a maze of crates and ropes, ships looming like ghosts in the fog. The star crescent moon was a sleek brigantine, its crew bustling despite the hour's late hour. Holmes led us to a shadowed stack of barrels, his eyes fixed on the deck, a man matching the barmaid's description tool. Burly, a crescent moon peeking from his sleeve directed the crew. Black Jack. Holmes signalled for patience, and we waited, the rain soaking through our coats. At last, Jack descended the gangplank, meeting a cloaked figure at the wharf's edge. The figure's face was masked, their voice low but commanding. Holmes crept closer, I following, my heart pounding. We caught fragments of their talk, the Locket third, Selina's crag. The veil thins tomorrow. The cloaked figure handed Jack a sealed letter, its crescent moon seal gleaming in the lamplight. Vesper, or their agent, before we could act, a sailor spotted us, shouting in alarm. Jack drew a knife, lunging at Holmes, while the cloaked figure fled into the fog. Holmes parried with his cane, disarming Jack with a crack, but the crew swarmed us. I fired a warning shot, scattering them, and we dragged Jack into an alley. Holmes pinned him, his voice cold. Who is Vesper? Where's the Locket third? Jack spat, his eyes defiant. You're dead, Holmes. Vesper sees all. The Lockets. Gone North Ravens Point, tomorrow night. The moon rises, and you can't stop it. Holmes searched him, finding the letter. It read, The veil thins at Ravens Point. Secure the third key. Vesper commands. Jack laughed, blood trickling from his lip, and Holmes knocked him out. Leaving him for Lestrade's men, we returned to Baker Street, the letter in hand, our disguises sodden. Holmes spread a map of Northumberland, marking Raven's Pointer. Coastal ruin, tied to lunar myths. The Order's final ritual. Watson, he said. The Locket third is there, and Vesper will be. We leave at dawn. The night was uneasy, Holmes studying the codex, its metaphors of the veil and the water's edge aligning with Raven's Point. I bandaged my arm, the knife's graze inflamed, and kept watch at the window. No spies appeared, but the rain's patter felt like a warning. Dawn brought a telegram from Eleanor Grayson, a new threat, a crescent moon carved into their gate. Holmes dispatched a constable to guard them, his focus on Raven's Point. The train north was a tense journey. Holmes sketching the Locket's patterns, their coordinates pointing to a cave beneath the ruin. Raven's Point was a jagged cliff, the sea crashing below, the new moon a faint crescent above. We reached the ruin at dusk, its stones carved with moons and waves. Holmes found a hidden entrance, a cave sealed with a crescent moonlock. The two Lockets clicked into place, opening the door. Inside, torches lit a vast chamber, its walls etched with celestial maps. At its center stood Vesper, masked, the third Locket in hand, flanked by cloaked figures. Holmes, they said, their voice unplaceable. You've brought the keys. The veil thins tonight, and the Codex's truth will be mine. Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. The Codex is a fraud, Vesper. Your order thrives on lies. Surrender the Locket, and you walk free. Vesper laughed, raising the Locket. The Codex maps the stars, Holmes' power to control empires. The Lockets unlock it, and I am its heir. The figures attacked, their crescent moon rings flashing. Holmes and I fought, my stick cracking skulls, his cane a blur. Vesper triggered a trap water flooding the cave, a tidal surge. We seized the locket, dragging Vesper's mask off a woman, her face unknown but fierce. She slipped free, vanishing. As the cave collapsed, we escaped with the locket, the codex's pages sodden but intact. Back in London, Lestrade raided the Order's haunts, but Vesper was gone. The lockets were locked away, their maps studied, revealing no treasure but a network of lies. Holmes sat by the fire, the crescent moon ring in hand, his eyes distant. "Vesper lives, Watson," he said. "The veil is thin, and the game is not over." Chapter 6. The Grayson Legacy. The rain lashed against the windows of 2-1B Baker Street, a relentless tattoo that mirrored the urgency pulsing through the room. Sherlock Holmes stood by the fire, the 3 lockets stew from our perilous encounters, and the 3rd rested from Vesper at Raven's pointer ranged on the mantel, their silver surfaces gleaming like captured stars. The Codex Silenus, its pages now dry but brittle, lay open on the table, its cryptic script a labyrinth of half-truths and veiled warnings. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my arm bandaged from the chaos of the flooded cave, my notebook filled with scrawled accounts of our pursuit of the Order of the Lunar Veil, Vesper's unmasking as a woman, her fierce escape, and the lingering mystery of her identity weighed heavily, as did Holmes's certainty that the Order's schemes were far from thwarted. Holmes's fingers traced the Codex's text, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "The lockets are keys, Watson," he said, his voice low but vibrant with purpose. "Not to gold or power, but to knowledge, a network of secrets the Order has guarded for centuries. The Codex maps their strongholds, their rituals, their deceptions, but its final passage speaks of the source of the moon's curse. Vesper seeks it, believing it to be a relic of divine authority. We must uncover its origin, and the Grayson family's role is central." I glanced at the lockets, their engravings, vines, moons. The cryptic cave Felis Luna now, familiar but no less ominous. "Grayson's journal," I said. "Charles Grayson mentioned the locket was stolen centuries ago from a noble woman tied to the Order. Could she be the source of this curse?" Holmes nodded, his gaze distant. "A plausible thread, Watson. The Grayson legacy is no mere inheritance. It's a burden tied to a scandal that birthed the Order's myth. The portrait inside the first locket, did you note her crescent moon? Pendant. She was no ordinary ancestor. We must delve into the Grayson family history, and Eleanor Grayson may hold the key." The clock struck 11, its chime swallowed by the storm outside. Holmes crossed to his desk, retrieving a stack of genealogical records he'd requested days earlier. "The Graysons trace their line to the 18th century, Watson, to a family of minor nobility in Devon. A scandal in 1763, an heiress, Lady Cassandra Grayson, vanished after a duel involving her lover and a rival. Rumours spoke of a cursed locket, her parting gift, blamed for her ruin. The Order's crescent moon symbol emerges in records soon after." I frowned, piecing it together. "You think Lady Cassandra's locket is the one Charles inherited, and the curse is a story to scare off thieves?" Holmes's lips twitched in a grim smile. "Not a story, Watson, but a weapon. The Order wove the curse to control, to manipulate. Lady Cassandra's disappearance was no accident. She was targeted, her locket stolen to cement the Order's power. Vesper believes the lockets lead to her Legosia relic, a text or a truth that sustains their myth. We visit the Graysons tomorrow, But tonight we trace the Locket's path. Holmes spread a map of England, marking Devon, Sussex, Cornwall, and Northumberland, the sites of our encounters. The Lockets form a celestial pattern, Watson, aligned with lunar phases. Devon is the origin, the moon's eye where the curse began. We need records, church, archives, estate deeds, anything tied to Lady Cassandra. A knock at the door startled me. Mrs. Hudson entered, soaked from a brief errand, bearing a telegram. "From Inspector Lestrade, Mr. Holmes," she said, shaking her head. "He's in a state." Holmes tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the message. A break-in at Scotland Yard's evidence room, the crescent moon ring we took from Harrow's man gone, and a guard swears he saw a cloaked woman. Nearby, Vesper. I stared, my blood chilling. She's in London, then, after the Lockets. Or the Codex, Holmes said, his voice cold. She knows we have it. Lestrade's men are searching Limehouse, but Vesper is a phantom. We must act swiftly. Watson, prepare your revolver. We leave for Kensington at dawn. The night passed. Uneasily, Holmes poring over the Codex, its metaphors of the moon's eye and the veil aligning with Devon's coastal cliffs. I kept watch, the rain's rhythm lulling but deceptive. No spies appeared, but the storm felt like a harbinger. Dawn broke grey and sudden, the streets of Kensington slick with mud. The Grayson townhouse was quiet, its gates still bearing the crescent moon carving from the latest threat. Eleanor Grayson met us at the door, her face pale but resolute, Charles beside her, his eyes haunted but alert. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Eleanor said, ushering us into the drawing room. "We've had no peace. The threat's the mark on our gated as if they know Charles is alive." Holmes took a seat, his gaze piercing. "Mrs. Grayson, your husband's family holds a secret tied to a locket passed down for generations. Tell me of Lady Cassandra Grayson, an ancestor from the 18th century. Eleanor frowned, glancing at Charles. "Cassandra. I've heard the name in old stories. A tragic figure, they said, betrayed by her lover. There's a portrait of her in the attic, locked away. Charles's father forbade us to speak of her." Charles nodded, his voice hoarse. "The locket came with the portrait, hidden in a box. My father called it cursed, said it brought ruin. I thought it was nonsense, until the order came for it." Holmes leaned forward. "Show me the portrait, Mr. Grayson." We followed them to the attic, a dusty warren of crates and cobwebs. Charles uncovered a canvas, revealing a woman strikingly. Like the Locket's miniature, severe, delicate, her eyes piercing, a crescent moon pendant at her neck. Beneath the frame was an inscription: "Cassandra, 1763, Felum Luna." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The moon's eye, Watson. Note the date, the year of her disappearance." "Mrs. Grayson, are there family papers, letters, anything from her time?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "In the study, locked in a chest. Charles's father kept them secret." We descended to the study, where Charles produced a rusted key. The chest yielded a bundle of yellowed letters, tied with a ribbon, and a small journal, its cover embossed with a crescent moon. Holmes seized the journal, his fingers trembling with anticipation. "Cassandra's own hand," he said, scanning. "The pages. She writes of a lover, Lord Edmund Vanelius, Vane's ancestor, no doubt, and a rival, Sir Alaric Thorne, an antiquarian obsessed with lunar relics. A duel left Vane wounded, Thorne dead, and Cassandra vanished. She speaks of a sacred trust, a relic hidden where the moon meets the sea. The locket was her key. I stared, the pieces aligning. Thorn the merchant's ancestor, and Vane's vendetta stems from this scandal. Holmes nodded, pocketing the journal. The order was born from this betrayal. Cassandra's relic, perhaps a text, like the codex was stolen, her locket used to control its myth. Vesper seeks it, believing it grants dominion. We must go to Devon, to the Grayson estate, where Cassandra hid her trust. A crash from downstairs shattered the silence. Charles started, Eleanor gasping. Holmes drew his revolver, signalling for quiet, and we crept to the hall. The front door hung ajar, rain gusting in. A figure fled into the storm, a cloaked woman. Her silhouette unmistakable. Vesper, Holmes shouted, giving chase. I followed, my boots slipping on the wet cobblestones. Charles and Eleanor left with a shouted command to bar the door. The fog swallowed Vesper's trail, but Holmes found a dropped letter by the gate, its crescent moon seal broken. It read, "The source lies at moon's end. The veil thins tomorrow. Vesper commands." Holmes's eyes burned with triumph. Moon's end, what's in a cliff in Devon, near the Grayson estate. The locket's origin and Vesper's goal. We leave tonight. We returned to Baker Street, Holmes dispatching a telegram to Lestrade to guard the Graysons. He packed the locket's codex and Cassandra's journal, his movements precise but urgent. Vesper is desperate, he said. The lunar convergence tomorrow's new moon is her deadline. Moon's end holds the truth. The train to Devon was a tense journey, the storm following us, lightning illuminating Holmes's grim face. He studied Cassandra's journal, its cryptic references to the moon's eye aligning with moon's end, a coastal cliff tied to lunar myths. Cassandra hid her relic there, he said, not gold, but knowledge, a text, exposing the order's founders, perhaps, or a map to their true vault. Moon's End was a desolate promontory, the sea crashing below, the new moon a faint crescent above. The Grayson estate, a crumbling manor, stood nearby, its windows dark. We reached the cliff at midnight, guided by the locket's coordinates. Their engravings glowing faintly in the torchlight. Holmes found a cave, its entrance carved with moons and vines. Inside, a stone altar held a sealed chest, its lock matching the locket's. We inserted them, the mechanism clicking, but before the chest opened, a voice echoed, Holmes. Vesper stood at the cave's mouth, masked, flanked by cloaked figures, their crescent moon rings flashing. You've brought the keys, she said, her voice low, fierce. The source is mine, Cassandra's truth, the order's birthright. Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. Cassandra's truth is a lie, Vesper. The order thrives on fraud. Surrender, and you live. Vesper laughed, raising a blade. The chest holds her diary, the order's sins, their power. I'll rewrite it and rule. The figures attacked, their knives gleaming. Holmes and I fought, my stick cracking bones, his cane a blur. Vesper reached the chest, but Holmes tackled her, the lockets clattering. The cave shook, a tidal surge flooding in, triggered by the mechanism. We seized the chest, dragging Vesper's mask off a woman, her face scarred, unknown. Chapter 7. A trap in the fog. The storm that had pursued us from Devon's Moon's End clung to London like a vengeful wraith, its torrents turning Baker Street into a river of shadows. Inside 2-1B, the fire sputtered against the damp, casting an uneven glow over the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes stood, his lean figure taut with restless energy. The chest from Vesper's cave, its ancient oak surface etched with crescent moons, rested on the table, its dire Lady Cassandra, Grayson's final testament, open beside it. The 3 lockets, their silver now tarnished from the sea's assault, lay in a neat row, their engravings a silent challenge. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nursing a fresh bruise from our escape, my revolver within reach, the weight of Vesper's unmasked face a scarred, unknown woman lingering in my mind. The Order of the Lunar Veil's myth had been exposed, but Vesper's flight and the diary's cryptic hints of a lost library kept the mystery alive. A puzzle Holmes was determined to solve. Holmes's fingers traced the diary's faded script. His eyes narrowed in concentration. Cassandra's words confirm it. "Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with purpose. "The Order was born from her betray, Ledmond Vane and Alaric Thorne. Her lover and rival stole her locket to control a myth of power. Her sacred trust was no relic, but knowledge, a library of texts exposing their frauds, hidden and later burned. Yet the diary mentions a final veil, a secret preserved by her descendants. Vesper seeks it, believing it restores the Order's dominion." I glanced at the chest, its lockets now spent, their celestial patterns mapped to dead ends. "The final veil," I said, frowning. "Another sight, like Moon's End, or something the Graysons still hold." Holmes nodded, closing the diary with a snap. "Precisely. Cassandra's heirs, Grayson's line may guard a clue, wittingly or not. The Order's threats against them, the crescent moon carvings, suggest Vesper believes they possess it. But the diary's last entry is incomplete, torn away. The missing page may name the veil's location. The clock on the mantel struck midnight, its chime swallowed by the storm's roar. Holmes crossed to the window, parting the curtains to peer into the fog. "Vesper is in London, Watson," he said, his voice cold. "The theft of the crescent moon ring from Scotland Yard proves her audacity. She's watching us, waiting for a misstep. We must draw her out, set a trap, using the lockets as bait." I frowned, uneasy. "A trap? She slipped us twice, Holmes. And her men, those cloaked figures, are ruthless." Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. "Which is why we control the board, Watson. Vesper's obsession with the lockets blinds her. We leak word that we've found the missing page, a map to the final veil. She'll come and we'll unmask. Her true aim." A faint creak from the street below cut him off. Holmes froze, his hand on his revolver, and I gripped mine, my heart quickening. The fog was impenetrable, but a shadow moved beneath a gas lamp, a cloaked figure, motionless, watching. "Our quarry grows bold," Holmes whispered, his eyes gleaming. "Stay here, Watson. Keep the lights burning." He donned his coat and slipped out, a phantom in the mist. I waited, the diary's weight pressing on my thoughts, the lockets glinting like eyes. Minutes stretched, the storm's howl masking any sound of pursuit. At last, Holmes returned, his face flushed, afresh. Tear in his sleeve. "She eluded me," he said, tossing his coat aside. "A woman, cloaked with Vesper's grace. She left this." He held up a small, wax-sealed note, its crescent moon embossed in red. The message was brief. "The veil falls at the equinox. Return. The lockets, or the Graysons burn." I stared, my blood chilling. "The equinox tomorrow night. She's forcing our hand." Holmes nodded, pocketing the note. "A deadline, Watson. The equinox aligns with the Order's lunar Reitzer, new moon. Perfect for their rituals. We must act before Vesper strikes." Tomorrow we visit the British Museum. Cassandra's diary mentions a scholar, Dr. Evelyn Marwood, who studied lunar cults in 1763. Her notes may hold the missing page's clue. The night passed in restless vigil, Holmes poring over the diary, while I kept watch, the storm's fury. Unrelenting, no further spies appeared, but the fog felt alive, a veil concealing unseen threats. Dawn broke grey and sodden, the streets of London slick with rain. The British Museum was a fortress of marble and history, its halls echoing with the whispers of ages. Dr. Marwood, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, met us in her cluttered office, surrounded by tomes and artifacts. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice crisp. "Your telegram mentioned Lady Cassandra Grayson, a tragic figure tied to a lunar sect that became the Order of the Lunar Veil." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Her diary speaks of a final veil, a secret hidden by her descendants. "Have you records from 1763, notes on her or the Order?" Marwood frowned, retrieving a leather-bound ledger. "Cassandra was a patron of my predecessor, Dr. Thomas Lyle. His notes mention her locket, a key to a library she claimed held truths to shame the stars. Lyle dismissed it as myth, but he catalogued a letter from her, sealed with a crescent moon. It vanished in 1764, stolen, we suspect, by the Order." Holmes's eyes gleamed, and Lyle's other papers. Marwood gestured to a locked cabinet. "Stored here, but they're fragile. I'll fetch them." As she left, Holmes examined the cabinet, his lockpicks in hand. "No time for bureaucracy, Watson." He opened it, revealing a bundle of yellowed papers. Among them was a sketch of a locket, identical to ours. With a note in Lyle's hand, Cassandra's key points to St. Mary's Crypt, London, where the veil falls. Holmes pocketed the sketch, his voice low. "St. Mary's, Watson, a derelict. Church in Whitechapel, tied to lunar rites. The final veil is there, and Vesper knows it. We set our trap tonight." We left Marwood none the wiser, and returned to Baker Street to prepare. Holmes drafted a false telegram to Lestrade to be intercepted, claiming we'd found the missing page. A map to St. Mary's. "Vesper's spies will bite," he said, loading his revolver. "We station ourselves at the crypt with Lestrade, men hidden nearby." The plan was bold, but the memory of Vesper's traps gnawed at me. "And if she brings the Order's full force?" I asked. Holmes's eyes burned with determination. "Then we end this, Watson. The lockets, the diary, the codex, they're tools of a lie. Vesper's power is her myth, and we'll shatter it." Dusk fell, the storm easing to a drizzle, the fog thickening. St. Mary's Crypt was a ruin in Whitechapel's heart, its spire a broken finger against the sky. The crypt's entrance, hidden beneath a collapsed altar, was carved with crescent moons. Holmes and I took position inside, the lockets and diary as bait, Lestrade's men concealed in the shadows. Hours passed, the silence oppressive. At midnight, a cloaked figure appeared Vesper, her scarred face unmasked, her eyes fierce. She was alone, a blade in hand, the third locket at her neck. "Holmes," she said, her voice low, "you've brought the keys. The veil falls tonight, and Cassandra's truth is mine." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. "Cassandra's truth is a fraud, Vesper. The library burned, the Order's power a lie. Surrender the locket, and you walk free." Vesper laughed, raising the locket. "The crypt holds her final texture map to the Order's true vault. Wealth, beyond your dreams. I'll claim it and rise. Before Holmes could act, cloaked figures emerged, their crescent moon rings flashing. Lestrange's men sprang, and chaos erupted, knives clashing, shouts echoing. I fought beside Holmes, my stick cracking skulls, his cane a blur. Vesper reached the crypt's altar, inserting the third locket, triggering a mechanism hidden door, revealing a stone chest. Holmes tackled her, the lockets clattering. The chest opened, yielding not gold, but a single parchment, a map, charred, its edges illegible. Vesper screamed, seizing it, but Holmes wrested it free. The crypt shook, a trap triggered, stones falling. We dragged Vesper out, her mask lost. Her face a mask of rage. Lestrange's men subdued her men, but Vesper slipped free, vanishing into the fog. The map was useless, its vault long plundered. Back at Baker Street, Holmes studied the lockets, their purpose spent. The Order's myth is broken, Watson, he said, tossing the crescent moon ring into the fire. But Vesper lives, and her vengeance festers. The Graysons were safe, the lockets locked away, the diary and codex archived. The storm cleared, but the fog of mystery lingered. Vesper's shadow, a promise of battles to come. Chapter 8. The Order's lair. The fog that had plagued London for weeks seemed to retreat at last, leaving Baker Street bathed in a pale, uneasy moonlight that filtered through the curtains of 2-1B. Inside, the fire crackled fitfully, casting long shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes stood, his lean frame taut with restless energy. The three lockets, their silver surfaces now scarred from their trials, lay on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary and the Codex Silenus, their secrets partially unravelled but still pulsing with menace. The charred map from St. Mary's crypt, its edges crumbling, rested under a magnifying glass, a tantalizing but useless relic of the Order of the Unravell's ambitions. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my arm stiff from the brawl in Whitechapel, my revolver cleaned, and ready, the memory of Vesper's scarred face and fierce escape burning in my mind. Her flight, the Order's persistence, and the elusive final veil kept the mystery alive. A puzzle Holmes was determined to solve before Vesper struck again. Holmes's fingers traced the map's faint lines. His eyes narrowed in concentration. "The map is a decoy, Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with purpose. "Its vault was plundered centuries ago, likely by the Order's founders to fund their myth. Yet Vesper's desperation suggests she believes another secret remains, the final veil Cassandra spoke of. The diary's torn page, the Codex's metaphors, all point to a hidden stronghold, the Order's true lair. We must find it, and Vesper will follow." I glanced at the lockets, their engravings, vines, moons, cave fellies, Luna now, familiar but no less ominous. "The Order's lair," I said, frowning. "Another ruin, like Vesper's hold, or Selena's crag, or something. Closer, in London." Holmes nodded, closing the diary with a snap. "London, Watson. The Order's rituals are tied to the city's underbelly docks, crypts, forgotten places. The Codex mentions a sanctuary beneath the moon's gaze, where the veil was first. Woven St. Mary's was a false lead, a trap to guard the true sight. The crescent moon seal, the ring, Vesper's audacity, they all converge here. We must infiltrate the Order's inner circle, and I know where to begin." He crossed to his desk, retrieving a worn ledger of London's private clubs. "The Crescent Club, Watson, where Harrow met Vesper. Its exclusivity masks darker dealings. Mycroft hinted at its ties to esoteric societies. Tonight, I attend their gathering, disguised. You'll watch the Graysons, they're still targets. I frowned, uneasy, disguised. The Order knows your face, Holmes, and Vespucci's no fool. Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. Which is why I'll be a stranger, Watson, a collector lured by whispers of lunar relics. The Order craves allies with wealth and ambition. I'll give them one. Prepare your revolver, but stay with the Graysons. Vesper's threats against them are no bluff. The clock struck 10, its chime sharp in the quiet room. Holmes began his transformation, donning a false beard, spectacles, and a tailored suit. That aged him a decade. His posture shifted, his voice taking on a clipped, continental accent. Herr Gustav Klein, antiquarian, he said, testing his guise. Recently arrived from Vienna, seeking rare relics. The Crescent Club will welcome me. I watched, marveling at his skill, but my unease grew. And if they suspect you, Holmes's eyes gleamed. Then the game quickens, Watson. I'll signal Lestrade if needed. Now to Kensington. The Grayson townhouse was a fortress of nerves, its windows barred, a constable at the gate. Eleanor Grayson met us, her face pale, Charles beside her, his eyes haunted. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, she said, her voice trembling. The threats haven't stopped. Last night, a crescent moon was painted on our wall, in red. Holmes examined the mark, visible through the window, its paint still tacky. Vesper's signature, he said, his voice low. She's taunting us, keeping us divided. Watson will stay tonight. Admit no one else. Charles gripped my arm, his voice hoarse. Find her, Doctor. This cursed snow myth. It's her, I nodded, settling in the drawing room, my revolver hidden but ready. Holmes left, his disguise flawless, a cab carrying him to Pall Mall. The night was tense, the Graysons silent, the constable's footsteps a steady rhythm outside. I kept watch, Cassandra's diary in my thoughts, its tale of betrayal echoing Vesper's vengeance. Holmes. As Herr Klein entered the Crescent Club, its oak-panelled grandeur a facade for secrecy. The steward, Hargreaves, greeted him with deference, noting his forged credentials. Herr Klein, he said, our guest speaker awaits in the lunar chamber, a rare honor. The lunar chamber was a vaulted hall, its walls hung with tapestries of moons and stars. A dozen men sat at a round table, their faces masked with crescent moon emblems, their rings glinting. At the head stood a cloaked figure, Vesper, unmasked, her scarred face fierce, her eyes scanning the room. Holmes took a seat, his gaze unchallenged, his pulse steady. Gentlemen, Vesper said, her voice low, commanding. The equinox marks our ascension. The lockets are secured, but the final veil the sanctuary awaits beneath the city. Cassandra's legacy, the source of our power, lies at the moon's heart. Join us and share its glory. Holmes leaned forward, his accent perfect. A bold claim, madame. What proof have you of this sanctuary? Vesper's eyes narrowed, but she smiled. Proof, Herr Klein. The Codex Silenus, recovered from Silenus Crag. Its map points to the moon's heart, a crypt beneath London, sealed since Cassandra's fall. The lockets are its keys. Tomorrow, at the equinox, we open it. A man beside Holmes, his ring flashing, spoke, and Holmes, he's thwarted us twice. Vesper's smile turned cold. Holmes is distracted, guarding the Graysons, his ally. Watson is no threat. The moon's heart will be hours before he knows. Holmes masked his reaction, noting every detail: Vesper's confidence, the men's deference, the mention of a crypt. He probed further, feigning greed. And the reward, madame? What does the sanctuary hold? Vesper raised a locket, its silver gleaming. Knowledge, haircline, texts to sway empires, wealth to rival kings. Cassandra hid them, but we are her heirs. The meeting ended, Vesper dismissing them. Holmes lingered, slipping a note to Hargreaves, a forged offer of funds, ensuring his return. He left, signaling Lestrade's men, hidden nearby, to watch the club. Back at the Grayson, I waited, the night oppressive. At 2 a.m., a crash woke me. The constable, slumped at the gate, a dart in his neck. I drew my revolver, rousing the Graysons. A cloaked figure fled into the fog, a crescent moon ring glinting. I fired a warning shot, but they vanished. Holmes returned at dawn, his disguise shed, his face grim. Vesper's lair is beneath London, what's in a crypt called the Moon's Heart, likely under an old church. The equinox is tonight, their final ritual. But your attack they know where. Close. I recounted the assault, the constable now recovering. Holmes examined the dart, its tip coated with a sedative. Vesper's work, he said. She's dividing us, striking at our allies. We must move now, before the equinox. Holmes spread a map of London's underground, marking old churches. The Moon's Heart aligns with St. Botolph's, a derelict site in Aldgate, tied to lunar cults. The Codex's metaphors beneath the moon's gaze point there. We go, tonight, with Lestrade's men. The day passed in preparation. Holmes studying the Codex, its cryptic passages hinting at a sealed crypt. I checked my revolver, the Graysons safe under guard. Dusk fell, the moon a faint crescent, the city hushed. St. Botolph's was a ruin, its stones blackened by time, its crypt hidden beneath a collapsed nave. Holmes found the entrance, a slab carved with moons, the lockets fitting its mechanism. The door groaned open, revealing a torchlit chamber, its walls etched with celestial maps. Vesper stood at an altar, the third locket in hand, flanked by cloaked figures. Holmes, she said, her scarred face fierce. You're late. The veil falls, and the Moon's Heart is mine. Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. The heart is empty, Vesper. Cassandra's texts burned, her legacy a lie. Surrender, and you live. Vesper laughed, raising the locket. The crypt holds her final codex, a map to the Order's true wealth, hidden abroad. I'll claim it and rise. The figures attacked, their knives flashing. Lestrade's men stormed in, and chaos erupted: gunshots, screams, the clash of steel. I fought beside Holmes, my stick cracking skulls, his cane a blur. Vesper reached the altar, inserting the locket, opening a chest empty, save for a single parchment. A forged map. Holmes tackled her, the locket clattering. The crypt shook, a trap triggered, stones falling. We dragged Vesper out, her face a mask of rage, but she slipped free, vanishing into the fog. The map was a decoy, the Order's wealth a myth. Back at Baker Street, Holmes studied the lockets, their purpose spent. Vesper's myth is shattered, Watson, he said, tossing the crescent moon ring into the fire. But she lives, and her vengeance festers. The Graysons were safe, the lockets locked away, the diary and codex archived. The moon rose, clear at last, but Vesper's shadow lingered, a promise of battles to come. Chapter 9. The Magnate's Game. The morning sun pierced the lingering mist of Baker Street, casting a frail light into the cluttered sitting room of 2-1B. Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes half closed in a meditative trance that belied the storm of deductions raging within. The 3 lockets, their silver surfaces scarred from their trials, rested on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary and the Codex Silenus, their secrets now a map to a shattered myth. The charred parchment from St. Mary's crypt, a decoy of the Order of the Lunar Veil's supposed wealth, lay under a magnifying glass, a silent taunt. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my arms stiff from the brawl at the Moon's Heart, my revolver cleaned and ready, the memory of Vesper's scarred face and fierce escape burning in my mind. Her flight, the Order's persistence, and the elusive final veil kept the mystery alive. A puzzle Holmes was determined to solve before Vesper struck again. Holmes's eyes flicked open, sharp as a hawk's. "The Order's myth is broken, Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with purpose. "But their influence endures, woven through Sir Edmund Harrow's shipping empire. His arrest has not crippled them. His wealth and connections shield a network we've only grazed. We must uncover his role in the Locket's theft and Charles Grayson's disappearance, and dismantle his operations." I nodded, recalling Harrow's name in Grayson's files and the stellar crescent at the docks. Harrow's in custody, though surely his influence is curtailed. Holmes's lips twitched in a grim smile. A man like Harrow has lieutenants, Watson pawns, to move in his absence. His shipping records, his correspondence with the Order. Hold the key. We begin at Scotland Yard to question him and confirm his status. We donned our coats, the crisp air a welcome relief after the fog's oppression. Scotland Yard buzzed with activity, officers darting through corridors, the clatter of typewriters a constant hum. Inspector Lestrade met us in his office, his face etched with fatigue, papers strewn across his desk. "Holmes, Watson," he said, gesturing to chairs. "Harrow's case is a nightmare. His lawyers are circling, claiming insufficient evidence. He's been transferred to Pentonville Prison, but there's talk of bail. His wealth buys influence." Holmes's eyes narrowed. Bail? For a man tied to smuggling, fraud, and attempted murder? Preposterous. What of his records? Lestrade sighed, rubbing his temples. "We've seized his office, but the documents are a maze-coded ledgers, false manifests. His chief lieutenant, Reginald Thorpe, runs the day-to-day operations. He's stonewalling, claims ignorance of anything beyond legitimate trade." Holmes leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "Thorpe, a name worth pursuing. A man in his position knows more than he admits. We visit him, Lestrade, and I need access to Harrow's. Sell his silence must break." Lestrade frowned. Hesitant, "Harrow's under tight guard, Holmes, and Thorpe's slippery. His office is a fortress. But I'll arrange a meeting with Thorpe. As for Harrow, I'll see what I can do." Holmes rose, his decision made. "Do so, Lestrade. Time is short. Watson, we go to the city." Thorpe's office was a sleek edifice of glass and steel overlooking the Thames, a monument to Harrow. Wealth, the receptionist, a severe woman with spectacles perched on her nose, eyed us warily as we entered. "Mr. Thorpe is in a meeting," she said, her tone clipped. Holmes smiled, his charm disarming. "Please inform him that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are here on a matter of urgency. I believe he'll make time." She hesitated, then lifted the telephone. Moments later, We were ushered into Thorpe's office, a spacious room with panoramic views of the river. Reginald Thorpe was a tall, imposing man in his 50s, with silver hair and a piercing gaze that met ours with calculated calm. He rose, extending a hand. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "To what do I owe this visit?" Holmes took a seat, his eyes fixed on Thorpe. "We're investigating Sir Edmund Harrow's ties to the Order of the Lunar Veil, a society implicated in the theft of a locket and the abduction of Charles Grayson. Your role as Harrow's lieutenant places you at the heart of his operations. What do you know of his illicit dealings?" Thorpe's face remained impassive, but his fingers tightened on the desk's edge. "I'm a businessman, Mr. Holmes. My duties are to manage Harrow's legitimate enterprises: shipping, trade, logistics. I have no knowledge of any order or criminal activities." Holmes leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. "Come now, Mr. Thorpe. Harrow's ships carried relics, antiquities, smuggled under false manifests. The crescent moon sealer symbol of the Order appears in his correspondence. And your cufflinks, sir, bear that same motif. A coincidence?" Thorpe's eyes flickered, a brief crack in his composure. He glanced at his cuffs, silver links embossed with crescent moons, and adjusted them with a forced smile. "A gift, Mr. Holmes. A trifle, nothing more." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "And the tattoo on your wrist? A crescent moon, partially hidden by your sleeve, not so easily dismissed." Thorpe's face paled, and he tugged his sleeve down, but the gesture was futile. "You're mistaken," he said, his voice strained. Holmes rose, his tone cold. "Think not, Mr. Thorpe. You are part of the Order, a loyal servant to Harrow and Vesper. But with Harrow in prison and Vesper's plans thwarted, your position is precarious. Cooperate, and I may overlook your involvement." Thorpe hesitated, his eyes darting to the door. Then, with a sigh, he sank back into his chair, his shoulders slumping. "What do you want to know?" Holmes sat again, his expression triumphant. "Everything, Mr. Thorpe. Start with Harrow's role in the Order and the purpose of the relics he smuggled." Thorpe took a deep breath, his voice low. "Harrow was the Order's financier, using his ships to transport relics from the Levant statues, texts, anything tied to lunar worship. Vesper believed they held power, keys to ancient knowledge, but it was a facade, a way to extort wealth. From believers, the locket was different, though Vesper claimed it was one of 3 keys to a vault, a myth to rally the Order. Holmes's fingers drummed on the arm of his chair. "And this vault, where is it?" Thorpe shook his head. "I don't know. Harrow kept that secret, shared only with Vesper. But there's a ledger hidden in his private safe at the Crescent Club. It details the Order's transactions, their strongholds, their members. If the vault exists, it's there." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "The Crescent Club, a fitting lair, and Vesper, where is she?" Thorpe's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's in London, hiding. She contacted me yesterday, demanding the ledger. She's desperate. Holmes, her myth is crumbling, but she won't stop." Holmes rose, his decision made. "Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Stay here and speak to no one. Watson, we go to the Crescent Club." As we left, Thorpe's warning echoed in my mind. "Be careful, Holmes," he called. "Vesper's watching, and she's not alone." The Crescent Club was a fortress of privilege in Pall Mall, its oak-panelled halls reeking of cigars and secrecy. The steward, Hargreaves, greeted us with a wary nod, recalling our prior visit. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice low. "The club is closed to guests today." Holmes smiled, his tone smooth. "We're here on official business, Hargreaves. Sir Edmund Harrow's private room open it, or Scotland Yard will." Hargreaves paled, fumbling with his keys. He led us to a secluded chamber, its walls hung with lunar tapestries, a heavy safe embedded in the floor. Holmes examined the lock, his fingers deft with his picks. "A combination, Watson," he murmured. "Harrow's arrogance will be his undoing." He worked swiftly, the safe clicking open to reveal a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with coded entries, names, dates, shipments, all marked with the crescent moon. Holmes scanned it, his eyes narrowing. The orders network, Watson merchants, nobles, even a magistrate, and Hera, reference to a lunar vault beneath St. Paul's, sealed since 1763. I stared, my blood chilling. St. Paul's. In the heart of London. Holmes nodded, pocketing the ledger. "Cassandra's final veil, perhaps. Vesper will seek it, believing it holds her salvation." "We must." A crash interrupted him, the door splintering as cloaked figures burst in, their crescent moon rings flashing. Vesper stood among them, her scarred face unmasked, her eyes blazing. "Holmes," she hissed, a blade in hand. "The ledger is mine." Holmes drew his revolver, his voice cold. "You're late, Vesper. The vault is a myth, like your power. Surrender, and you live." Vesper laughed, her men advancing. I fired a warning shot, scattering them, but Vesper lunged, her blade grazing Holmes's arm. He parried with his cane, disarming her, but she triggered a smoke bomb, the room filling with choking mist. We fought blindly, my stick cracking skulls, Holmes's revolver barking. Vesper's voice echoed through the haze. "The vault is real, Holmes. The moon rises tomorrow." When the smoke cleared, she was gone, her men subdued, Hargreaves cowering. Holmes clutched the ledger, blood seeping through his sleeve. "She's wounded, Watson," he said, his voice grim but desperate. "St. Paul's is our next move." We returned to Baker Street, Holmes bandaging his arm, the ledger spread before us. Its entries detailed a crypt beneath St. Paul's, sealed after Cassandra's fall, rumoured to hold her final texture map to the Order's true wealth or its ultimate lie. "Tomorrow, Watson," Holmes said, his eyes burning. "The equinox's new moon, Vesper's last stand." Chapter 10. The Keeper revealed. The dawn broke over Baker Street with a deceptive calm. The sky a pale canvas streaked with clouds that hinted at the storm to come. Inside 221B, the air was thick with the scent of coffee and the faint tang of antiseptic from Sherlock Holmes's bandaged arm, a memento of Vesper's blade at the Crescent Club, the 3 lockets, their silver surfaces etched with moons and vines, lay on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary, the Codex Silenus, and the ledger from Harrow's safe, their secrets converging toward a final confrontation. The charred map from St. Mary's crypt, a decoy, rested under a pile of notes, while the crescent moon ring, now cold, glinted on the mantel. I stood by the window, my revolver cleaned and loaded, the ache in my arm a dull reminder of our battles. Vesper's escape, Reginald Thorpe's disappearance, and the ledger's cryptic reference to a lunar vault beneath St. Paul's kept the mystery of the Order of the Lunar Veil alive. A puzzle Holmes was determined to solve before the equinoxes. New moon. Holmes sat at the table, his eyes scanning the ledger's coded entries, his fingers twitching with restless energy. "The vault is a myth, Watson," he said, his voice low but taut with purpose. "A lure to keep the Order's faithful in thrall. Yet Vesper believes it holds a truth, Cassandra's final text, a map to wealth or power. The ledger names St. Paul's as its site, sealed since 1763. But it also mentions a keeper, a guardian of the vault's secret. We must unmask this keeper to find Vesper." I glanced at the lockets, their engravings Cave Fellies Luna now, a familiar warning. "The keeper," I said, frowning, "another of Vesper's lieutenants, like Thorpe, or someone closer to the—" Grayson's Holmes nodded, closing the ledger with a snap. "Precisely. The diary suggests Cassandra entrusted her secret to a bloodline, her heirs, or another tied to the scandal. Elias Vane, Charles Grayson's cousin, was obsessed with the locket, claiming it as his birthright. His vendetta was personal, not just the Order's. I suspect Vane was the keeper, or believed himself to be. His presumed death at Selene's Crag is unconfirmed. We must verify it." The clock struck 7, its chime sharp in the quiet room. Holmes rose, retrieving a telegram from Lestrade, delivered at dawn. "Scotland Yard searched Thorpe's office," he said, scanning the message. "No trace of him, but they found a crescent moon seal, broken, and a note in Vesper's hand. The keeper rises at the equinox. Secure the vault." "Vesper's desperation grows, Watson. She's rallying her forces for St. Paul's." I frowned, uneasy. If Vane is dead, who is the keeper now? And St. Paul's a cathedral in the heart of London. It's a bold choice for a hideout. Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. Bold or arrogant? St. Paul's crypts are vast, some sealed since the Great Fire. The Order's influence reaches High Nobel's magistrates, as the ledger shows. They've hidden in plain sight for centuries. We visit the cathedral today. But first, we check on the Graysons. Vesper's threats against them are escalating. We donned our coats, the morning air crisp but heavy with the promise of rain. The Grayson townhouse in Kensington was a fortress of fear, its gate now reinforced. A constable pacing outside. Eleanor Grayson met us at the door, her face pale, Charles beside her, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "It's worse. Last night, someone tried to break in a cloaked figure with a crescent moon ring. The constable scared them off, but they left this." She held up a wax-sealed note, its crescent moon embossed in red. Holmes opened it, his eyes narrowing. The message was brief. The keeper claims the locket. The equinox ends it. I stared, my blood chilling. "The keeper," I said. "They're targeting the Graysons again." Holmes pocketed the note, his voice cold. "Vesper's taunt, or the keeper's? Charles, tell me of Elias Vane, your cousin disgraced, obsessed with the locket. Could he have survived Selene's Crag?" Charles paled, his hands trembling. "Elias, I thought him dead, but he was always cunning. He blamed our family for his ruin, said the locket was his by right. If he's alive, he'd stop at nothing." Holmes nodded, his gaze piercing. "And any others in your line tied to Cassandra's legacy?" Eleanor hesitated, then spoke. "There's an uncle, Silas Vane, Elias's father. He's estranged, living in Whitechapel, a recluse. Charles's father warned us against him, said he was mad, obsessed with the family's past." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Silas Vane, a potential keeper or a pawn?" We visit him, Watson, after St. Paul's. For now, stay here, admit no one. Lestrade's men will guard you. We left the Grayson's fear palpable, and hailed a cab to St. Paul's. The cathedral loomed over London, its dome a beacon in the grey light, its crypts a labyrinth of history. The verger, a stooped man named Hawkins, met us at the entrance, his eyes wary. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, clutching his keys. "Inspector Lestrade warned us you'd come. The crypts are restricted, but I'll show you what I can." He led us below, the air growing cold, the walls lined with tombs and plaques. Holmes's eyes scanned every detail, his fingers tracing. Faint carvings, moons, vines, barely visible. "The orders, Mark," he murmured. "They've been here, Watson." Hawkins paused at a sealed door, its stone carved with a crescent moon. "This crypt's been locked since the 18th century, he said. "No one's entered, not in my time." Holmes examined the lock, his fingers deft. "A mechanism, Watson, like the Locket's design. The 3 keys would open it, but it's been tampered with recent scratches, fresh oil. Someone's been here." Before Hawkins could protest, Holmes produced his lockpicks, working swiftly. The door groaned open, revealing a narrow passage, torchlit, its walls etched with celestial maps. At its end was a chamber, empty save for an altar, its surface scarred with crescent moons. A single parchment lay there, sealed with a crescent moon. Holmes seized it, breaking the seal. The text was brief. "The keeper guards the vault. The equinox unveils it. Vesper commands." I stared, my heart quickening. "The keeper, again," I said. "They're close, Holmes." Holmes nodded, pocketing the parchment. "Too close. The vault is a lure, Watson, but the keeper is realer guardian, perhaps Silas Vane. We go to Whitechapel." Hawkins, shaken, led us out, promising silence. Whitechapel was a warren of squalor, its streets thick with vendors and beggars. Silas Vane's lodging was a crumbling tenement, its door answered by a gaunt man in his 60s, his face scarred, his eyes feverish. A crescent moon pendant hung at his neck. "Silas Vane?" Holmes asked, his voice soft but piercing. The man nodded, his gaze wary. "Who are you, Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. Watson?" "We seek the truth of the locket, the order, and the keeper." Eyes widened, and he ushered us inside. The room a chaos of papers and relic spoons, stars, lockets. "The keeper," he whispered. "It's me, Cassandra's heir, chosen to guard her secret. Elias, my son, betrayed me, stole the locket for Vesper. But I know the vault's truth." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Speak, Mr. Vane. What is the vault?" Silas's voice trembled. "No gold, no power, just a text, Cassandra's. Final codex, hidden beneath St. Paul's. It names the order's founders, Vane, Thorn, nobles who betrayed her. I protected it, but Elias, he thought it was wealth. Vesper seeks it to rewrite the order's myth." Holmes nodded, his voice cold. "And Elias is he, alive?" Silas hesitated, tears in his eyes. "I don't know," the crypt collapsed. "But he's cunning. If he lives, he's with Vesper, hunting the codex." A crash at the door cut him off. Cloaked figures burst in, their crescent moon rings flashing. Vesper led them, her scarred face fierce, a blade in hand. "Holmes," she hissed, "you've found the keeper. The codex is mine." Holmes drew his revolver, his voice steady. "The codex is a lie, Vesper. Cassandra's truth exposes your fraught. Surrender. Vesper laughed, her men advancing, fired a warning shot, scattering them, but Vesper lunged, her blade grazing Silas's arm. Holmes tackled her, disarming her, but she triggered a smoke bomb, the room filling with mist. We fought blindly, my stick cracking skulls, Holmes's revolver barking. Silas screamed, clutching a hidden locket heirlesses, identical to ours. Vesper's voice echoed, "The codex is real, Holmes. The equinox unveils it." She vanished, her men subdued, Silas wounded but alive. Holmes seized the locket, its engravings fresh, a fourth key. "Elias lives," Holmes said, his voice grim. "He's the keeper now, or Vesper's pawn. St. Paul's, tonight, Watson the equinox." We left Silas with a neighbour, Lestrade's men summoned. The cathedral loomed at dusk, the new moon a faint crescent. Holmes found the crypt's true entrance, hidden beneath a tomb, the 4 lockets fitting its lock. The door opened, revealing a chamber lit by torches, its walls carved with moons. Elias Vane stood at an altar, unscarred, alive, the codex in hand. Vesper flanked him, her eyes blazing. "Holmes," she said, "the keeper delivers. The codex is ours." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. "A list of names, Vesper traitors, long dead. Your myth is broken. Surrender." Vesper laughed, raising the codex. "Names to blackmail empires, Holmes. I'll rise." Elias nodded, feverish, inserting the lockets, opening a chest empty, save for a parchment. A forged list. Holmes tackled Elias, the codex falling. The chamber shook, a trap triggered, stones falling. We dragged Elias out, Vesper escaping. The codex a lie. Lestrade's men seized Elias, the lockets spent. Back at Baker Street, Holmes sat by the fire, the crescent moon ring in hand. "Vesper's free, Watson," he said. "The game continues." Chapter 11. The midnight rescue. The rain had returned to London, a relentless curtain that shrouded Baker Street in a veil of gloom, mirroring the tension that gripped 2 to 1B. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the flickering gaslight, his eyes scanning the street below for any sign of Vesper's spies. The 4 lockets, their silver surfaces etched with moons and vines, lay on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary. The Codex Silenus and the forged parchment from St. Paul's crypt, their secrets now a tangled web of lies and betrayal. Elias Vane, the keeper, was in Lestrade's custody. His survival at Selene's Crag, a bitter revelation. But Vesper's escape with her fierce determination kept the Order of the Lunar Veil's threat alive. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my revolver at hand, the bruises from our latest battle a dull ache, my mind haunted by Vesper's scarred face and the promise of her vengeance. The equinox had passed, but the mystery of the final veil lingered, a puzzle Holmes was determined to solve. Holmes turned from the window, his face grim but resolute. "Elias Vane's confession confirms it, Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with urgency. "The Codex was a forgery, a lure to keep the Order's faithful in thrall. But Vesper believes a true relic remains Cassandra's final veil, a secret tied to the Grayson bloodline. Vane hinted at a prisoner, someone Vesper holds, to force the Graysons' compliance. We must find them, and St. Paul's crypt gave us a clue. I glanced at the lockets, their engravings cave. Felice Luna, warning now etched in my memory. "A prisoner?" I asked, frowning. Charles Grayson is safe, but could there be another? And where? Vespers too cunning to keep them close. Holmes nodded, crossing to the table where a crumpled note lay, dropped by Elias in the crypts. Chaos. It bore a crescent moon seal, its text brief. The Vale's guardian lies at the keeper's lair, Thamside. The moon sets tomorrow. The keeper's lair, Holmes murmured, spreading a map of London's waterfront. Vane's stronghold. Likely a warehouse tied to Harrow's smuggling. The Thamside clue points to Wapping or Shadwell, where the Order's relics pass. We raid it tonight, Watson, before Vesper moves her captive. The clock struck 10, its chimes swallowed by the rain's roar. Holmes retrieved his revolver, checking its chambers, his movements precise but urgent. Lestrade's men will join us, but we lead. Vesper's wounded, her blade grazed my arm at the Crescent Club, and Elias bloodied her. She's desperate, and desperation breeds mistakes. I frowned, uneasy. A warehouse raid, Holmes. Vesper's men are ruthless, and she slipped us before. What if it's a trap? Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. Then we spring it, Watson. The prisoner is our leverage Vesper's hold over the Graysons. If we free them, her myth crumbles. Prepare your medical bagger, captive may need care. We donned our coats, the rain soaking us as we hailed a cab to Scotland Yard. Lestrade met us in the yard, his face etched with worry, a squad of constables at his back. Holmes. Watson, he said, pulling us aside. Vane's talking, but it's disjointed drance about a guardian. Someone Vesper calls the key to the Vale. He mentioned a warehouse in Shadwell, owned by a shell company linked to Harrow. We've got men watching it, but it's fortified. Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming. Shadwell then, the note confirms it. Lead us, Lestrade, but stay back. Until I signal. Vesper's spies are everywhere. The cab ride to Shadwell was tense, the rain blurring the city into a maze of shadows. The warehouse loomed by the Thames, a squat brick structure with boarded windows, its dockside gate guarded by two men in long coats, their crescent moon rings glinting. Holmes signalled for silence, leading us through an alley to a side entrance. His lockpicks at work. The door clicked open, revealing a dark interior stacked with crates relics, statues, all bearing the Order's moon motif. We crept inside, Lestrade's men fanning out, their lanterns dimmed. Holmes's eyes scanned the shadows, his revolver steady. A faint moan broke the silence from a stairwell leading below. The prisoner, Holmes whispered, gesturing me forward. We descended, the air growing cold, the walls damp with river. Seepage dotted the stair's base was a heavy door, its lock carved with a crescent moon. Holmes inserted the fourth locket, taken from Elias, and the mechanism clicked. The door swung open, revealing a dank chamber lit by a single torch. Bound to a chair was a frail figure, an elderly woman, her face lined with age, her eyes wide with fear. A crescent moon pendant hung at her neck, identical to Cassandra's in the Locket's portrait. Miss Abigail Grayson, Holmes said softly, cutting her bonds. Charles's aunt, I presume. The woman nodded, her voice a rasp. Abigail, yes, they took me. Vesper, she wanted the Vale's secret. I knelt beside her, checking her pulse, weak but steady. She's dehydrated, Holmes, but alive. We need to get her out. Before Holmes could respond, footsteps echoed above boots, heavy, deliberate. Vesper's voice cut through the dark. Holmes, you're predictable. The Guardian is mine, and the Vale will fall. Holmes spun, his revolver raised, as cloaked figures descended, their crescent moon rings flashing. Lestrade's men charged in, and chaos erupted. Gunshots, shouts, the clash of steel. I shielded Abigail, my stick cracking a thug's skull, while Holmes fought Vesper, her blade a blur. She was wounded, blood seeping through her cloak, but her eyes burned with fury. "The veil is real, Holmes," she hissed, parrying his cane. "Abigail knows its place. Cassandra's last gift, hidden in London." Holmes disarmed her, his revolver at her throat, but she laughed, triggering a lever. The chamber shook, water flooding in from the Thames, a trap to drown us. "The moon sets, Holmes," she screamed, slipping free as her men fell. I carried Abigail, her weight slight but cumbersome, as Holmes led us through the rising water. Lestrade's men cleared a path, but Vesper vanished, her cloak a shadow in the chaos. We reached the dockside, the rain lashing us, Abigail gasping but safe. Lestrade summoned a cab, sending her to a hospital under guard, while Holmes searched the chamber's debris, finding a dropped note. "The veil lies at the moon's cradle, equinox's end. Vesper commands." Holmes pocketed it, his face grim. "The moon's cradle, what's in another crypt, likely in London's heart. Abigail's knowledge is the key. We visit her tomorrow, but tonight we secure the Graysons." Back at Baker Street, the rain eased, but the tension did not. Holmes spread a map marking known crypts: St. Paul's, St. Botolph's, others tied to lunar myths. "The moon's cradle," he murmured, "a final stronghold, perhaps beneath a church or Guildhall. Cassandra's veil is no relic, but a truth her bloodline's burden." The night was restless, Holmes poring over the diary and codex, while I kept watch, the lockets glinting like eyes. Dawn brought a telegram from Lestrade. Abigail was stable, but Elias had escaped custody, a guard found with a crescent moon dart in his neck. Vesper's reach was unbroken. We visited Abigail at the hospital, her room guarded, her face pale but resolute. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice frail. Vesper tortured me, demanding the veil's place. I told her nothing. But Cassandra's diary, it's not complete. A page, hidden in our family's chapel, names the moon's cradle. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Where is this chapel, Miss Grayson?" "St. Anne's, in Limehouse," she said. "The page is in the altar, sealed with a moon lock. I swore to protect it, but Vesper, she'll kill for it." Holmes nodded, his voice firm. "Rest, Miss Grayson. We'll end this." We hailed a cab to Limehouse, the streets thick with vendors and fog. St. Anne's was a crumbling church, its spire leaning, its altar carved with moons. Holmes found a hidden compartment, the lockets fitting its lock. A parchment emerged, yellowed, its text in Cassandra's hand. "The moon's cradle lies beneath the Guildhall, where the veil was woven. The truth is no treasure, but a mirror." Holmes pocketed it, his face grim. "The Guildhall, what's in London's heart, a fitting lair. Vesper will strike tonight, believing the veil holds power. We prepare a trap." We returned to Baker Street, Holmes drafting a false telegram to Lestrade to be intercepted, claiming the moon's cradle's location. "Vesper's spies will bite," he said, loading his revolver. We station ourselves at the Guildhall with Lestrade's men. Dusk fell, the moon a faint crescent, the city hushed. The Guildhall's crypt was a maze of stone, its entrance hidden beneath a mosaic of stars. Holmes found the moon's cradle a chamber lit by torches, its walls carved with moons, an altar at its centre. Vesper stood there, unmasked, her scarred face fierce, Elias at her side, his eyes feverish. "Holmes," she said, raising a locket, "you've brought the keys. The veil is mine." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. "The veil is a mirror, Vesper Cassandra's truth, exposing your lie. Surrender." Vesper laughed, inserting the locket, opening a chest empty save for a parchment. A list of the Order's sins, worthless now. Elias screamed, lunging, but Holmes tackled him, the locket clattering. The chamber shook, a trap triggered, stones falling. Lestrade's men stormed in, seizing Elias, but Vesper slipped free, vanishing into the shadows. Back at Baker Street, Holmes sat by the fire, the locket spent, the parchment a relic of a dead myth. "Vesper lives, Watson," he said, his eyes distant. The game continues. Chapter 12. The Phantom's trail. The rain had ceased, leaving Baker Street slick and gleaming under a moonless sky, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and coal smoke. Inside 2-1B, the fire cast a fitful glow across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes stood, his lean frame taut with restless energy. The 4 lockets, their silver surfaces etched with moons and vines, lay on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary, the Codex Sinister, and the parchment from the Guildhall's moons cradle a list of the Order of the Lunar Veil's long-dead scenes, a final proof of their myth's collapse. Elias Vane, the keeper, was back in custody, his betrayal cemented. But Vesper's escape into the shadows of the Guildhall crypt kept the mystery alive. Her scarred face and fierce resolve, a spectre haunting our thoughts. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my revolver at hand, my bruises from the crypt's collapse a dull ache, my mind wrestling with the Order's persistence and Vesper's vow to rise again. The final veil was exposed, but the game, as Holmes insisted, was far from over. Holmes paced before the fire, his eyes sharp with calculation, the Guildhall parchment in hand. "Vesper's myth is shattered, Watson," he said, his voice low but charged with purpose. "The moon's cradle yielded no treasure, only a mirror of the Order's fraud. Yet her escape proves she's not finished. Her vengeance drives her, and she seeks a new leverage. The note she dropped in the crypt mentioned a phantom's trail, a path to the Order's last stronghold. We must follow it, or she. Strike again." I glanced at the lockets, their engravings cave, Felis Luna now, a familiar warning, their purpose seemingly spent. "The phantom's trail," I said, frowning. "Another crypt, or a person. Vesper's too cunning to leave. Obvious clues." Holmes nodded, stopping to retrieve the note. A crumpled scrap with a crescent moon seal. Its text brief: "The phantom's trail leads to the keeper's shadow, where the moon weeps. Vesper rises." "The keeper's shadow," he murmured, spreading. A map of London across the table. Elias Vane was the keeper, but his father, Silas Vane, knew the Order's secrets. The moon weeps suggests a place of loss perhaps, a graveyard, a chapel, or a site tied to Cassandra's fall. We begin with Silas, but first we ensure the Graysons' safety. The clock struck 11, its chime sharp in the quiet room. Holmes crossed to his desk, retrieving a telegram from Lestrade, delivered at dusk. "Elias is secure in Pentonville," he said, scanning the message. But a guard found a crescent moon carved into his cell door, fresh. Vesper's reach extends. Even there, and Abigail Grayson she's recovering, but a nurse saw a cloaked figure near her ward last night. Vespers circling, Watson. I frowned, my blood chilling. She's targeting Abigail again, or Charles and Eleanor. Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. All of them, Watson. The Graysons are her obsession, Cassandra's bloodline, the key to her myth. We visit Abigail tomorrow, but tonight we scout Silas Vane's lodging. His knowledge of the order may reveal the phantom's trail. We donned our coats, the night air cold and biting, the streets of Whitechapel a maze of shadows and muffled voices. Silas Vane's tenement was as we'd left it, a crumbling relic of poverty, its door ajar, the scent of mildew heavy. Silas met us in his clotted room, his face gaunt, his arm bandaged from Vesper's blade, his crescent moon pendant glinting at his neck. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice a rasp. "I heard of Elias alive, but lost to her. Vesper's madness won't end." Holmes's gaze was piercing. "The phantom's trail, Mr. Vane. Vesper's note mentions it, tied to the keeper's shadow. You knew the order's secrets, what? Is it?" Silas hesitated, his eyes darting to the shadows. "The keeper's shadow, that's me, or was, before Elias stole it. The trail's a legend in the Adora path to their last sanctuary, where Cassandra's truth was buried. The moon weeps is St. Jude's, a graveyard in Stepney, where her lover, Edmund Vane, was laid after the duel. The order hid something there, a relic or text, to seal their myth." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "St. Jude's, and this relic, what is it?" Silas shook his head, his voice trembling. "I never saw it. A box, they said, sealed with a moonlock, buried in Edmund's tomb. Vesper believes it holds Cassandra's lost words, a map to power. But it's a lie. Holmes, her truth was burned, like the library. A creak from the stairwell cut him off. Holmes spun, his revolver drawn, as I gripped mine, my heart quickening. The door burst open, revealing cloaked figures, their crescent moon rings flashing. Vesper stood among them, her scarred face fierce, a blade in hand. "Holmes," she hissed, "you've found the shadow. The trail is mine." Holmes fired. Warning shot, scattering her men, but Vesper lunged, her blade grazing Silas's shoulder. I tackled a thug, my stick cracking his skull, while Holmes parried Vesper, his cane a blur. "The trail is a myth, Vesper," he shouted. "Your power's gone." She laughed, her eyes wild. "The box is real, Holmes." Cassandra's words, my salvation. She triggered a smoke bomb, the room filling with choking mist. We fought blindly, Silas's screams echoing, my revolver barking. Vesper's voice cut through. "St. Jude's, Holmes. The moon weeps tomorrow." The smoke cleared, Vesper gone, her men subdued, Silas bleeding but alive. Holmes searched the room, finding a dropped Locketilius's, its engravings fresh. "A fifth key. She's desperate, Watson," he said, pocketing it. "St. Jude's is her last gamble." We raid it at dawn. We left Silas with a constable, summoned by a neighbour's shout, and returned to Baker Street, the locket heavy in Holmes's pocket. He spread a map marking St. Jude's, a derelict graveyard near Stepney Green, its tombs tied to lunar myths. "The phantom's trail," he murmured. Cassandra's lover, Edmund Vane, betrayed her, sparking the order. His tomb hides their final lie. The night was restless, Holmes studying the diary and codex, while I kept watch, the lockets glinting like eyes. Dawn brought a telegram from Lestrade. Abigail's ward was attacked. A nurse sedated with a crescent moon dart, but she was safe. Vesper's reach was relentless. We visited Abigail at the hospital, her face pale but resolute, a constable at her door. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice frail. "Vespers after the box Cassandra's last gift, buried with Edmund." I told her nothing but St. Jude's. "It's sacred to the order." Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming. "The box, Miss Grayson. What does it hold?" "A letter," she said. "Cassandra's confession, naming her betrayers, Edmund Thorne. The order's founders. It's no treasure, just truth, but Vesper sees power." Holmes's voice was firm. "Rest, Miss Grayson. We'll end this." We hailed a cab to Stepney, the streets grey, the fog thick. St. Jude's was a tangle of graves, its stones weathered. Edmund Vane's tomb, a tall obelisk, carved with a crescent moon. Holmes found a hidden trapdoor, its lock etched with moons. The 5 lockets fit, the mechanism clicking, opening a stair descending into darkness. We entered, torchlight revealing a chamber, its walls damp, its air heavy with decay. At its center was an altar, a bronze box engraved with moons, sealed tight. Vesper stood there, cloaked, her scarred face unmasked, Elias Vane at her side, his eyes feverish. "Holmes," she said, raising a blade, "you've brought the keys. The box is mine." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. "The box is a lie, Vesper. Cassandra's truth damns your order, its power a fraud. Surrender." Vesper laughed, inserting the locket, opening the box. Her confession names to rule empires. She cried, seizing a parchment, yellowed but intact. Elias nodded, but Holmes lunged, reading it a list of betrayers, worthless now, their crimes dust. The chamber shook, a trap triggered, water seeping in. Lestrade's men, signalled by our flare, stormed in, seizing Elias's thugs. I fought Vane, my stick cracking his arm, while Holmes tackled Vesper, the parchment falling. She screamed, her blade slashing, but slipped free, vanishing into a tunnel. As the vault sealed, we escaped with the box, the parchment safe, Elias subdued. Lestrade's men searched the tunnel, but Vesper was gone. The parchment, Cassandra's confession, named the order's sins, its power a myth. Back at Baker Street, Holmes sat by the fire, the locket spent, the box on his table, Vesper's. "Free Watson," he said, his eyes distant. "The phantom's trail ends, but her shadow lingers." The Graysons were safe, Abigail recovering, the box sealed away. The order's myth was shattered, but Vesper's vow echoed, a promise of battles to come. Chapter 13. The moon's last whisper. The fog had returned to London, a spectral shroud that cloaked Baker Street in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional clatter of a passing cab. Inside 221B, the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes stood, his lean figure taut with the restless energy of a hunter nearing his quarry. The 5 lockets, their silver surfaces etched with moons and vines, lay on the table beside Lady Cassandra Grayson's diary, the Codex Silenus, and the bronze box from St. Jude's graveyard, its parchment Cassandra's confession now. Relic of a shattered myth, Elias Vane, the keeper, was back in Pentonville's cells, his betrayal cemented. But Vesper's escape through the tunnel beneath St. Jude's kept the order of the Lunar Vale's threat alive. Her scarred face and fierce vow to rise again a spectre in our minds. I, Dr. John Watson, sat nearby, my revolver at hand, my bruises from the crypt's collapse a dull ache, my thoughts haunted by Vesper's relentless pursuit of a power that never was. The phantom's trail had ended, but Holmes was certain. A final thread remained, a whisper of the moon that Vesper would follow to her doom or ours. Holmes paced before the fire, his eyes sharp with calculation, the St. Jude's parchment in hand. Cassandra's confession exposes the orders found as Sedmond Vane, Alaric Thorne, their betrayal of her trust. He said, his voice low but charged with urgency. But Vesper sees it as a weapon, a list to blackmail their descendants. Men of wealth and power today. Her escape proves she's not finished. She seeks a final relic, the moon's last whisper. A term from the Codex. We must find it before she does, or the Graysons will never know peace. I glanced at the lockets, their engravings gave Feli's lunar warning now etched in my memory. Their purpose seemingly exhausted. The moon's last whisper, I said, frowning. Another myth. The Codex is full of metaphors. Could it be a place, a person, or another decoy? Holmes nodded, stopping to retrieve the Codex. Its brittle pages opened to a passage marked with his precise script. The Codex speaks of a whisper where the moon falls silent, a sanctuary where the order's truth was sealed, not in stone but in blood. Cassandra's diary hints at a confidant, a woman who fled with her final secret after the duel of 1763. This confidant's line may hold the whisperer relic, a text or a name Vesper craves. We begin with Abigail Grayson, who knew of the St. Jude's box. Her memory may hold the key. The clock struck midnight, its chimes swallowed by the fog's oppressive hush. Holmes crossed to his desk, retrieving a telegram from Lestrade, delivered at dusk. Elias Vane attempted suicide in his cell, he said, scanning the message. A crescent moon pendant was found in his hand, smuggled to him. He's alive, but raving about the whisper and Vesper's wrath, and a dock worker in Shadwell reported a cloaked woman near the stellar crescent, Harrow's ship. Vesper's in London, Watson, rallying her remnants. I frowned, my blood chilling. She's targeting the Graysons again, or the ship could it hold this whisper? Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. Both, Watson, the Graysons, are her obsession. Cassandra's bloodline, the key to her myth. The stellar crescent is a conduit for relics, perhaps hiding the whisper. We visit Abigail tomorrow, but tonight we scout the docks. Vesper's wounded Ilias bloodied her at St. Jude's, and her desperation will betray her. We donned our coats, the fog thick and cold, the streets of Shadwell a labyrinth of shadows and muffled cries. The stellar crescent loomed at the wharf, its hull dark, its crew sparse but alert. Holmes signalled for silence, leading us to a stack of crates, his revolver steady. A cloaked figure moved on the deck, her silhouette unmistakable. Vesper, her scarred face half hidden, a crescent moon ring glinting. Holmes crept closer, I following, my heart pounding. We caught her words, hissed to a sailor, the whispers aboard, sealed in the captain's safe. The moon falls tomorrow. The sailor nodded, producing a key, but spotted us, shouting an alarm. Vesper spun, her blade flashing, and the crew swarmed. I fired a warning shot, scattering them, while Holmes tackled Vesper, her cloak tearing in his grip. She slashed his arm, blood seeping, but he disarmed her, only for her to trigger a smoke bomb, the deck filling with mist. We fought. Blindly, my stick cracking skulls, Holmes's revolver barking. Vesper's voice echoed. The whisper's mine, Holmes. The moon falls at Blackfriars. She vanished over the rail, splashing into the Thames, her men subdued. Holmes searched the deck, finding a dropped note. The moon's last whisper lies at Blackfriars, where the veil was born. Vesper rises. Holmes pocketed it, his face grim, blood dripping from his arm. Blackfriars, Watson Bridge, a district tied to ancient rites. The whisper's there, and Vesper's racing for it. We return to Baker Street, but first, the captain's safe. We broke into the captain's cabin, Holmes's lockpicks, swift, the safe yielding a sealed box. Its lid carved with a crescent moon. Inside was a letter, in a woman's hand, Cassandra's confidant, naming a descendant, Margaret Hale, as guardian of the whisper, hidden at Blackfriars crypt. Margaret Hale, Holmes murmured, a name to trace. Vesper seeks her or her relic. Back at Baker Street, Holmes bandaged his arm, the box and letter on the table. He spread a map marking Blackfriars, a district rich with history, its crypts tied to lunar myths. The whisper, he said, is no treasure, but a truth, Cassandra's final secret, perhaps a bloodline. We find Margaret Hale or her heir. Before Vesper, the night was restless, Holmes poring over genealogical records, while I kept watch, the lockets glinting like eyes. Dawn brought a telegram from Lestrade. Abigail's hospital was secure, but a crescent moon was painted on her door, a taunt. We visited her, her face pale but resolute, a constable guarding her. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, she said, her voice frail. Vesper asked about Margaret Hale, a cousin of Cassandra's confidant. I said nothing, but Margaret's line lived in Blackfriars, guarding a crypt at St. Dominic's. The whispers, they're a relic, a letter, I don't know. Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming. St. Dominic's, Miss Grayson, what does it hold? A vow, she said. Cassandra's promise to expose the order, sealed in a moonbox. Margaret's heir protects it, but I never knew their name. Holmes's voice was firm. Rest, Miss Grayson, we'll end this. We hailed a cab to Blackfriars, the fog thick. The Thames, a silver ribbon below. St. Dominic's was a derelict church, its crypt hidden beneath a shattered altar, its lock carved with moons. Holmes found a trapdoor, the 5 lockets fitting. Its mechanism, opening a stair into darkness. We descended. Torchlight revealing a chamber, its walls etched with moons, an altar at its center. A woman stood there, Margaret Hale's heir, Clara Hale, elderly but fierce, a crescent moon pendant at her neck. Vesper loomed behind her, her scarred face unmasked, a blade at Clara's throat. Holmes, she hissed, you've brought the keys, the whisper's mine. Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady. The whisper's a vow, Vesper, Cassandra's truth, a lie you can't wield. Surrender. Vesper laughed, pressing the blade. The box holds her bloodlines. Names power to rule. Clara knows. Clara shook her head, defiant, and Holmes lunged, disarming Vesper. But she triggered a trap, water flooding from the Thames, a tidal surge. I seized Clara, carrying her up the stair, while Holmes fought Vesper, the lockets clattering. The chamber shook, stones falling. Lestrade's men, signalled by our flare, stormed in, seizing Vesper's thugs. Holmes dragged Vesper free, but she slipped into a tunnel, her scream echoing. The whisper lives. We escaped with Clara and the box, its seal unbroken, a letter inside Cassandra's vow, naming her child's line, long extinct, no power left. Back at Baker Street, Holmes examined the box, the locket spent. Clara, safe with Lestrade, confirmed. The vows, truth a myth, worthless now. Vesper's tunnel was sealed, her fate unknown. The Graysons were secure, Abigail recovering, the Order's myth shattered. Holmes sat by the fire, the crescent moon ring in hand, his eyes distant. Vespers. Shadow lingers. Watson, he said. The moon's whisper fades, but the game endures.